I don't know. We're all
Okay. All right, guys. Sorry for the rough intro tonight. I imagine we are working on the technical difficulties on that, but welcome again to another exciting episode of Victory Never Sleeps. Always good to have you guys here. Tonight, some of you who may have been looking at the advertisement for tonight or seen it today, gone through a little bit of change of plans. So we're doing what we originally planned to do tonight, but also so the original plan tonight was to do covering two bits of lore that are sometimes grouped together and sometimes done separately. Collectively, they're known as the Svipdagsmál. The first part being the Grógaldr, and the second part, the Fjölsvinnsmál. And we're going to do them separate, but we're lumping them together tonight. We're going to cover both of them because we have a special treat for you in the month of December. Every single Wednesday in that month, Witan Svan and myself are going to go through Ale Saga. And that is one of, if not the most exciting and all over the place and chock full of oftentimes meaty, but just as often entertaining and fun content of any of our sagas. It is a very complete, very long, very intense saga that's got lots of parts about someone who is a very interesting man who led an extremely interesting life. And we celebrate him with a day of remembrance on the 9th of next month. And so we're going to jump ahead and go ahead and do that saga the entire month of December. I think it'll be fun for everybody. I encourage everybody to read along on their own, to get immersed in the background of it. And I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's been a number of years since I've read the saga myself. So I think it'll be exciting for everybody involved, and to go over it with Iceland's own Witan Svan Harrell. I think will be an added bonus. He can add some context and some familiarity, and I think it's going to be really good. Stuff to be aware of tonight. We have a new product for the first time in a long time. We've got the 2025 AFA calendar. This was put together by Gothy Trent East's lovely wife, Madison. It's beautifully done. It is illustrated with pictures of AFA activity over the last year. It's got our days of remembrance in there. It's got when each of our Hofs are celebrating each of our holy tides every month. It's a nice thing. It's something really cool, and I'm glad that we have, and I'd encourage anybody who wants to. They are in the store at runestone.org. Please go by. Get one for a friend. Get a couple for friends. Always a solid thing to do, and we appreciate you guys. Also starting out today, as seemingly always, GW Farnsworth bought us 5 coffees. We appreciate your continued generosity. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. He's able to do that through the little skinny thing that Nick just put up on the screen. If not, there is instructions in the description of this video if you'd like to donate that way. Thank you to everybody who's been such a loyal viewer and anybody who contributes. You guys are very generous with both your time and with your hard-earned money. We appreciate you guys a lot. As always, want to encourage everybody, like, share, subscribe, get the word out. tell family, tell friends, tell anybody you can. Word of mouth is such a powerful tool to get more eyes on this and more ears on this. If you think this is, something for folks to check out and something worth hearing, we continue to get really, really good feedback on the show. And we're very proud of that and very thankful that we have the opportunity to get to speak with you guys every week. So as always, tonight we're going to, and I think the link will pop up, we're going to be going through the Bellows translation. You can use whatever translation you'd like. Feel free to follow along with us. Ask questions whenever you want. Questions that are about the text or about a topic raised in the text, we'll try to do as those come about. And questions that are less directly related, we're going to save till the end of the show, but we will stick around and answer all your questions. Svan, can you give folks any necessary background for tonight's bits of lore? Anything they should know going in? Any points of familiarity they should have before we crack this open?
This poem is super interesting, has, I think, a lot of lore to offer, but it is not a common one that a lot of people know just right off the top of their head. If we're talking about Lord Odin speaking to the witch, that's pretty straightforward. If we talk about Lord Thor going into Jotunheim and, going through his trials of strength, that these are ones that come to mind. However, this one is not so much, and it's in league with the poem that we covered a little while back, Hindla Liod, where the Holy Freya tries to get Hindla to speak of Otar's lineage, and we talked about ascendancy. Well, in this case too, I would also make a point that Svipdagsmál or Swift-Day, who is a character in this poem, may be one and the same. He may be Otar, and Otar also may be Odur, who is a big mystery for a lot of folks when they talk about Odur and the Holy Freya and the loss of her lover, who makes, she sheds golden tears. A lot of folks think linguistically that this means it's Lord Odin, but I think this poem kind of really sets a tone that this may not be the case. And what we see here is another iteration of the fact that the Holy Freya gives out boon to mortal / ascendant or eventually risen folk. But I would argue too that Svipdag goes all the way back further into our history. I would say of the migration periods and early stages of Rome, because there are lending tales that just mimic. And then there's claims that Svipdag is part of royal family lines, and so he's never quite listed as a god. And then there's also the general acceptance that his mother or stepmother in the poem is a Jotun, but an ancient being. However, that's not it's not super established, but at the same time, it's kind of like it could be simply implied. When the gods encounter beings outside of the middle world, it's generally seen that they are not, folk. but at the same time, I mean, we speak about Lord Odin raising the vulva in, or the vulva in the witch in the underworld. And is she a Jotun? Is she a human? It's left to mystery. So we have the story of a young hero speaking to his mother, who is a practicer of Seidr, which is a form of trance, meditation and communication, and is asking her to help him ultimately gain access to the maiden surrounded by fire. That's a huge one. I won't go too much into that. We'll cover it, but a couple things for people to know. This poem was 2 separate poems, but since the subject is on Svipdag or Svipdagur, Svipdag, that generally people combine these 2 together, though they're technically 2 separate poems. So the first one is called Grógaldr, and Groa is the stepmother or the mother of Svipdag, and Galdr, generally we think of it as to mean like a runic sound, but the overall usage of the word is that it's a spell. It's a verbal incantation of some sort. And it can also be used synonymously with simply magic. So I think the broad sense of this term is Groa's spell or Groa's magic, would be a better kind of translation of this title. And it's very small, very short, and then we move into the latter half. So it's just worth noting that. Also, Svipdag is one of the only characters that is word for word or letter for letter translated in Saxo Grammaticus's Gesta Danorum. Saxo Grammaticus was a Christian Dane, and he wrote the history of the kings of Denmark. The difference was that he, really pushed in the gods, but he euhemerized them completely. He made them mortals. He made them, capricious kings, and so on and so forth. He did this partially for his disdain, and the other part is because he, was of that mindset that the only reason why his ancestors would believe in these gods is because they were somehow tricked by humans. But it's interesting that he, very rarely is there a cross-referencing, but he places Svipdag in the list of the originators of the kings of Denmark. And so Svipdag being either an exalted one, which I think is the case, but there could be argument too that he is an avatar of some sort, the ability for the gods to place themselves into the middle world and exist and affect Orlog is a topic that we've discussed before amongst the Gothar. Is like, to what level would it be, to do such things, and what evidence do we have that the gods might have done it? And Svipdag or Otar are prime examples of that possibility, along with shield sheafing, who's mentioned in Beowulf. So the mentioning is scant, but I think ultimately Svipdag is an elevated soul who, more likely than not, is Odur, the lost lover of Holy Freya.
Over in the chat, I see a couple of Croatian War Master wanted to pop in and
That's an
let
awesome name.
everybody know that Odin is the ancestral god of English speakers who are white. I would say he is the ancestral god of all speakers and non-speakers who happen to be white. He is, yeah, but he is certainly that which you claim that he is as well. Yeah, so anyways, Sierra's having a problem with her speakers, and that's news you can use, I suppose. Everybody else, I think I do understand your question. I don't suck at life, and we will get to that later this evening. Look forward to seeing you back then. If not, we will answer that when we're done with the text. With that, Svan, would you like to get us started on tonight's poem?
Yeah, and one thing I would like to point out right away, and this is something that scholars, there's the mistakes that could be made during transcribing the stories. The stories were stories first, and then they became poems that fit within specific styles and had very strict rules. So they were carved and shaped to fit in the mold. And then these were transcribed, and it was Snorri Sturluson and Sæmundur who gathered these together and wrote much, but not all. There may have been nameless transcribers, as well. And so in doing that, there is some writing repetitive errors and things that are kind of mismatched. I would say, to be honest, there are a lot less than I would suspect, if with like the telephone game, if you will. But it is evident here that, and it's on Bellows, who translates this. He of course gets the Holy Freya and Frigga mixed up because of the Haiti that is used. There's a name in here that's going to be spoken. It's Menglov, and Menglov is Menglother is gladly adorning the necklace, and Bellows kind of misinterprets that and says that the Holy Frigga is the bearer, or Holy Frigg is the bearer of the Brisingamen, the necklace that is the origin of her power and what exudes into the world through our passions and desires. So he does mess that up, and it's kind of seen. If you're on the website, I think they write about it. He writes about it in the bottom. So we start off with Sweep Day. Swift Day or Sudden Day is his name. And it really does speak to the idea of the breaking of light over a mountain. It's it's sudden, it's swift, and it cuts right into the eyes. So very, very kind of poetic name. Sweep Day speaks in one. He says, "Wake thee, Groa, wake, mother good. At the doors of the dead I call thee. Thy son bethink thee. Thou badest to seek thy help at the hill of death." So one of the things to consider in this situation is that Groa may be beyond the veil and the hill of death. We know that our ancestors talked about the threshold of death, the point in which there is of no return, is Nipa's cave. And Nipa's cave is where Garmr, the guardian of the dead, where he resides. So again, this is him standing at the threshold, but it also could be a barrow mound. And this is a common theme that is in stories of our ancestors, is coming to the barrow mound, cutting open the barrow mound and speaking in order to see the ghostly image of, the former king or one's father or one's mother. So this poem really, I think, has really old dating. And the reason for this is when you look at the funerary practices of our ancestors, it moved from barrow mounds to cremations, and then kind of back to barrow mounds and cremation. Like they kind of joined. So by the dating of this poem, as far as when it was possibly constructed, I think that they're lending back to the further time, the original time in which kurgans were made or barrows were made by our ancestors, ancestors to the Icelanders who composed this poem. So Groa speaks. What evil vexes mine only son? What baleful fate hast thou found, that thou callest thy mother who lies in the mold, and the world of the living has left? This would, of course, lend more so that Groa is not a Jotun, but a powerful witch of the human world. But again, the usage of molder being dust or the earth itself in relation to the dead. And Svipdag speaks in 3. He says, the woman false whom my father embraced has brought me a baleful game. For she bade me go forth where none may fare, and Mengloth the maid to seek. So now he's been tasked in order to find his the love, who is Mengloth, or the one who adorns the necklace, the glad necklace bearer. Groa speaks, long is the way, long thou must wander, but long is love as well. Thou mayest find perchance what thou fain wouldn't have, if the fates their favor will give. So here is kind of where it starts to frame the idea that perhaps the notion of gaining ascendancy with the divine is a process. It has a way to do it, but it is long and it is arduous. But ultimately, uniting with the divine is the end goal. And also, she, makes point to say that, and the translation is not fates, but skuld. And for those that know of the Mother Nornir, skuld is debt or doom, or that which is in essence fated to happen based off of the actions before. The willfulness that you participate in now will ultimately weave your debt or your doom or your fate. So I thought that was very interesting that he says, if the fates their favor will give, but at the same time, I understand he can't go in and say debt or doom, and people might not quite understand what that means. But it's worth noting that the word in the Old Norse, skuld, just means that the things you do now may very well give you the pathway to your goal. So it frames it differently from a fatalist view, that it doesn't matter if Svipdag tries or doesn't try, the end result is already manifested. No, what Groa is saying is that your actions may very well lead you to that which you deserve.
So that's a really important, it's an important thing for us to realize. There's I'd say a significant misconception when it comes to Asatru and free will. There is an idea that there's all this predetermined fate and you're just kind of at the whim of it. So I've seen that go two ways. I think people proudly will say that in the sense of, being fearless because, fate's already been written. So you're just, nothing's going to happen to you that hasn't already been foretold. So just go and embrace whatever challenge in front of you. I've also seen it as a lazy excuse not to do something because, well, fate's got it all planned out. So it doesn't really matter what I do anyway. And people beat their chest about that less proudly, but I think it gives them an excuse to sit on their hand and be an adorner of benches or grandma's couch.
Right.
The linguistics matter. The concept matters. Skuld is the same root as should, not will, not must, not has been foretold, but it's directional. It's a projection of, if you stay the course and you continue this path, this is the likely outcome. But it's not a guarantee, and it's really important to factor that in. By understanding and aligning yourself with the workings of Earth, you can see things to come. You can have visions or premonitions of the future, but your actions and the things you do and the things you put in the well, they're what shape the next phase of that tapestry. You can deviate from the course that's been presented before you, be that a good course or a bad course. You can lean into it and embrace it. And it's also been mentioned and should be reiterated that Skuld is the name of one of our holy Nornir, who looks over that future projection of things. I think that it's much less related to a fixed linear must happen and much closer to a momentum. If you understand it, that's the momentum an event is headed. That is a forecast of future events with present data and with things that are likely to occur. One can completely abdicate their responsibilities and drastically alter the momentum, the skuld of something that ought to happen. So there's a lot more depth in the concept than I think sociologists and early scholars of this have bequeathed down to us in their treatment of it. So make note of that.
All right, let's see. And just not expounding on that, but the next verse does kind of show that sense of desire to will does not always mean the completeness of an outcome. And you had made mention that a lot of times fatalism works towards kind of abolishing fear in some way, or at least an attempt to. But in this, in 5, it's a different way in which he says, like, no, I am afraid that I will be cut down in my prime in the danger, and that's why he's here. This is his motivation, is to gain the charms to protect him, the spells to be read over him that will safeguard him from death so that he, will not die at such a young age. And he says it right here in 5. He says, Svipdag says, charms full good, then chant to me, mother, and seek thy son to guard. For death do I fear on the way I shall fare, and in years I am young, methinks. So, he says, speak your spells good over me, and keep your mind in protecting me while you speak these spells, because death is on the road that I am going to travel, and I am young. And I think ultimately, too, is the ultimate point of this is, again, another Aryan mythos cycle is the attainment of the heart or the knowledge or the winning of the maiden. And this is, so familiar, even into the Christian times with knights. It is the same, cut from the same cloth. And this may be pre-migration era in the sense of the story. So the idea of the warrior going forth and finding the maiden, passing through trials, and then gaining her love, her affection, or her realization is a very old Aryan mythos cycle. And again, applying this to the possibility that the maiden is also a goddess, and the idea that she's an Ausenir, and that we can, through great devotion, be elevated in ways, if we, as far as focusing perhaps on devotion to one of the gods. So in 6, Groa speaks, then first I will chant thee the charm oft tried that Rani taught to Rind. From the shoulder, whatever mislikes thee shake, for the helper thyself shalt thou have. So this one, right out, Rani and Rind, the only thing that I can find is that Rani is a Haiti for Lord Odin, and it means the one who ransacks, or the one who plunders, a plunderer, a pilferer, if you will. And here he teaches it to Rinder, and that's a really interesting thing, because Rinder is one of the Austvanir, and she gives birth to one of the holy gods. And depending on the accounts, whether it's Saxo Snorri or Saxo. Saxo says that the gods are human, and that Lord Odin conquested Rinder, who was the queen of the Ruthians, which was the Ukrainians, or what would be Ukraine now. That he conquested her and used spells and herbs to get her and to sleep with her. But the difference with Snorri is that, he views the gods in their proper places as divine beings. And this again attests to the fact that Rindur is amongst the gods enough to where Lord Odin teaches her spells. Some people have suggested, though, that this is the spell that he used in order to to weaken her. But this, I don't think that is particularly the case. And again, we have to remind ourselves that Saxo had a heavy need to vilify the gods in a lot of different ways. So in this case here, it says, from the shoulder, whatever mislikes these shake, for the helper thyself shalt thou have. So anything that befalls you will be shirked off of you and onto something else or another. So that you, in essence, it's like making the false target. Anybody who might know of like witches' jars or things of that ilk, that's what this is. And in 7, the next I will chant thee, if needs thou must travel and wander a purposeless way. The bolts of earth shall on every side be thy guard on the road thou goest. So if you find yourself lost, then the very fabric of fate will guide you back towards the destination that you must apply your will. The bolts of earth. The interesting part about that is the word that is used is locker, and bolts are these are kind of like the pieces that would like rivet planks of a ship together. So I just I found it interesting, the translation as bolts, but again, the fabric or the substance of fate will always, from all sides, from everywhere, guide you to where you need to go, where your intended purpose, where your will has led you, or is wanting you, where you want your will to lead you. And I just realized too that's both mentions of two of the great Nornir. So in 8, then third I will chant thee, if threatening streams the danger of death shall bring, yet to hell shall turn both horn and ruth, and before thee the waters shall fail. Now, this part here is that, again, when we're talking about those writing translational problems, Bellows doesn't translate this wrong. I think this is actually a notation from from the composers of the poem, and it's mainly because these two rivers, the waters that are part of the Elvegaur, the 11 rivers, and they're not the words that are used here are not mentioned in Grimnismal, but there are two rivers that kind of match with that, and that is Hron and Hriv. And oftentimes H's are dropped off. So like Ruth, as it's used here, the possibility of having the H dropped off is pretty high, especially as Latin and other languages started to function a lot in Old Norse. So it's generally seen that this writing is incorrect, and that it is Hron and Hriv, the two rivers of the underworld. So if the threatening streams, the danger of death shall bring. So if you're looming near the rivers of death, if your time is being, where you're brought to this point, and to the land of the dead you shall turn, then I shall turn you away from these rivers that preside in the underworld. So again, yes, if you are close to death, you shall avert it. And in 9, then forth I will chant thee, if comes thy foes on the gallows way against thee, into thine hands shall their hearts be given, and peace shall the warriors wish. So this is truly an interesting one. It's not about defeating your enemies physically, but winning them over. And that in turn, she's saying that she's speaking the Galdr or the runes, and that if any find evil in their heart to come and take your life, the moment that they see you, and you are, close to them, you will win them over, and they'll wish peace upon you. I always am kind of like floored by that idea too. Is it's not always about simply defeating your enemies. Sometimes it is about speaking your case and turning them to be allies is a great strength as well. And in 10, then a fifth I will chant thee, if fetters perchance shall bind thy bending limbs. O'er thy thighs do I chant a loosening charm, and the lock it will burst from the limbs, and the fetters fall from the feet. Now, this is the same in the Runatol, which is a section of the Havamal.
Almost the exact same. I mean,
yeah,
the last part is the exact same words.
Yeah, and so there is these correlations that sometimes we speculate about the idea of like singular runes, and that's much easier to do in the Runatol because on the younger Futhark there's direct correlations.
It's Aus or Ensus that is the rune that loosens the fetters.
Right, Ansus. And again, the referencing to Lord Odin as the looser of fetters is one of his Haiti. And the Valknot, and I know we had a discussion about that a little while back about, is it Hrungnir's heart? And I already stated too that I don't think that is the case. I think that Hrungnir's heart having three sides is not indicative of the knot, but the idea of the knot and it being a fetter that binds you to the ultimate fate and the machinations of Lord Odin, that when you place it upon your body, and this is super strange, we're talking about this, I was just talking about this to my son this morning, the knot and it meaning that you are, fettered by the one who, can release all fetters. The one who ties the most unbreakable knot is Lord Odin, and that is the knot of your fate and being, brought into his plans without question or without remorse. So here, the fettering and the idea that our ancestors saw value in this. Let's look at this from another angle. Fettering, getting tied up and being able to loosen yourself from the fetters. This was enough of a situation that it was, deemed with great worth. The idea that you could be captured, the idea that you could be enslaved. And I think most folks who are familiar with Germanic culture and with Nordic culture is that, again, bondage, slavery, being fettered was such a grievous thing that, to be able to loosen yourself from them at that height of it is important. So I think it reflects to how much there is a sense of being free or being able to, do the things you wish to do and willfully in the world and not being locked down.
This goes into a comment that you had made last time you were here about how you thought that Fenrir was the worst of Loki's children, whereas the text had mentioned Jormungandr as being the worst. When we talk about fettering and constriction, the idea of restraint from expansion, being pinned down and unable to overcome, one of the big, and this is obviously absolutely applicable to actually if your foes tie you up, but on a bigger sense and a bigger layer in our lore, being able to escape your limitations, to go beyond your limitations, to break free and to expand is extremely, extremely important. The idea of overcoming limitation is very much a key to any kind of ascension. And I I think it's particularly apropos, and I think this maybe overextends the metaphor a bit, but I think it's really important to kind of mention. When we talk about heroes, and especially this month when we've spoken about the Einherjar, the idea of that is transcending your human limitation to ascend and become something more. Those, I think, as the Vedics would refer to it, attachments, your ability to transcend and go beyond the limitations and the things that would bind you is a key towards ascension. And I think this speaks to that as well. Part of the rune that's, applicable in that spell, it has kind of, it's strange linguistically, is there's as the Proto-Germanic word Ansus filters down into the Old Norse, it bifurcates, and it means, part of it goes to mean aus and the Aesir, our gods, and another part of it starts to mean mouth or estuary. They come from that same root. And I think that's worth mentioning when we talk about Galdr work and incantation, as we mentioned earlier. There's something very sacred and very transformative about vocalizing and speaking into existence. And that's one of the most primal things that we are imbued with, that our gods bless us with. And one of the close associations with not only Allfather Odin, but with his predecessors, is the roaring, the divine utterance, the speaking into his existence, the breaking the silence with voice. I think all of those things play together in the matrix of this particular spell.
I saw too in the comments, Igir Kuningas. He says, Groa is the Dis of vegetation. Let me see. The daughter. I don't know why this is not so easy for me to read. The Dis of vegetation, the daughter of the Alvar Sigtrig, sister of Sif, mother of Other Svipdag, with Egil and Guðdomr with Connor. And this is accordance to Ryberg. I think that is an interesting take, but to say so assuredly, I would give pause. Groa's name does it lends to the idea of something growing, the growing, or something of either power or vitality. But to say she is a Dis, that's interesting, because the title Dis and the title Alvar does implicate the idea that they are or once were human, unless we're, especially in the Dis format. We don't know if the Dis are ever being referred to outside of mortality, unless it's in reference to something else. Like, for instance, the Holy Freya is called Vanadis, and we know that Dis means a twister of fate, or a giver of boon and of wealth and of happiness. But when you state that a Dis of vegetation, I think it's interesting, or at least as when Ryberg states that, because
I don't fault that, and I don't fault the descendancy from King Sigtrig. The Sister of Sif, I think
That's the one I was.
seems
Yeah.
highly speculative. Again, I don't know that to be false, but I also don't know that to be true either. I see the association certainly with the idea of vegetation and growing things. Yeah, and I don't have a strong enough dog in the fight to really take fault with it. I'm just not yet convinced of that. I
Well, yeah, and
suppose.
that's what I was going to say is the connection to mortality through the Dees would then kind of allocate Sif to be removed from this lineage line because Sif is of the divine, and I have always taken that Groa and Svipdag are connected to. But I was just making the reason why Ryberg brings this up is because in the Gesta Danorum, Svipdag is mentioned as being in descendancy.
So I want to put this out there for anybody, and perhaps at one point it's not up there on my list of things to go over because it is just such a difficult and convoluted not work of things. If you haven't read the Gesta Danorum, which okay, so I show my age a bit. When Svan and I got involved in Asatru, that was one of the big ones that a lot of people read. It's come to my attention that in recent years, it's far more obscure than it once was as far as people reading it. So if you haven't read it, it's a very interesting read, but it's also very confusing, and I don't necessarily put I think that it has value to enhance and add meat on the bone of some of our other lore. But I also think it's very problematic, and so I don't take it as authoritative always. I think it's really interesting, and I think I take it with much more grains of salt than I would take other pieces of our lore, but I do find it fascinating, and I don't mean to disparage it, but I think it does add a lot of confusion into the mix, and I don't think that's due to accuracy always. There is a very overt force there to like forcibly euhemerize all of the divine into a historical chronological narrative that's strange and incongruent with other things we know. But it is an interesting source, and I know that Rydberg and folks that follow his train of thought on that lean heavily into it. And I do think there's valuable things to be gained from it. I find it really interesting. But it's a really cool source and a really cool book. And if you have not read it, you should familiarize yourself with it, and maybe we'll chip away at that at some point. It's kind of a daunting task. It is a weighty tome, and it's that's a lot. So we may hit that at some point. I think that's interesting. I do think as we go through our lore, something that's not celebrated or spoken about as a lot is the idea of mortal ascendancy and becoming the idea in the Greek of a demigod isn't quite the same, but as something more than just human and something a closer associate with our gods. And I think we don't see that as the focus very often, but we do see that occur time and again in the periphery.
Oh, and just to answer, Igor Kuningas asked, what was the book? It's Gesta Danorum by Saxor Grammaticus. I don't know if Nick can write that down for you.
What does that translate to? The deeds? The history and deeds of the Danes?
Yes, Gesta.
Well, I'm trying to think of what usually the English title is if it comes out to something different. It's like Jordane's History of the Goths. That's not what it was in Gothic, but yeah, Gesta Danorum is the title you're usually going to find it under.
Yeah, my old Norse translation doesn't bring it up.
Well, that's because it's
and it's a hybrid with his Latinization.
I think it's the Latin for.
Oh, that's right. It's probably Latin based entirely.
Yes, because Saxo is good at his grammar, as his title would indicate, and that grammar being Latin grammar, because he is a.
Now,
what was his position with the church? Do we know? The Roman Catholic Church. Anyways, that's a strange side trail, and we're in the midst here. So let's go ahead and finish out this work, and we'll get into the next section here because we're getting close.
All right. Yeah, we did kind of tangent off.
We tend to do.
As we tend to do. It's like running around in circles. Now, this is interesting too because people will hear it, and it's kind of an interesting point in which the story itself is probably all the way back to the migration period, but there's a mentioning here that brings it right into the modern time. If you were a poet of the 10th to 11th century, that I find super amusing. It amuses me all the time every time I hear it. But it does kind of play some of the politics that were going on at the time, or at least the religious politics.
All right, pause before Svan gets into it, just because I found it out. The idea is Saxo was the archbishop's clerk, perhaps. And Gesta Danorum does mean the deeds of the Danes, which, deeds that are written down are history. So, yeah. History or deeds of the Danes, I think, probably works, but linguistically. Go ahead.
All right. Well, so in 12, it says, and she's still chanting the spells over Svipdag, and she says, "A seventh I chant thee, if frost shall seek to kill thee on lofty crags, the fatal cold shall not grip thy flesh, and whole thy body shall be." So again, all of these spells, all of these poems, when you're reading this, should be in your mind, wow, these are like viable concerns amongst our ancestors. This was something they didn't want charms of uselessness. They wanted ones that made sense. And again, no more is more prudent than in number 13. An eighth I will chant thee, if ever by night thou shalt wander on murky ways, yet never the curse of a Christian woman from the dead shall do thee harm. And this one is just super interesting. So the translation is Kristin Dauðkona, a Christian dead woman. And this cursing from beyond the grave, or while possibly one is dying. I looked into a little bit about this, and there's a couple of things. One, Christians looked very badly upon their fellow folk who still remained to the native European faith. Their religion is kind of bent to do that. And the idea that a curse or something that can affect people was still held before Christianity came. So the idea of it just being a Christian woman lends me to think that this is more of a common occurrence, that these Christian women would have a tendency to sling curses upon those around them. I mean, these women were, in essence, the first kind of, turncoat slash betrayers of their culture.
I came not to bring peace, but a sword.
Oh, that's from the Bible, right?
But the key tenet to that passage, I came not to bring peace, but a sword, to turn, and I don't want to, get it wrong, but to turn kinfolk against one another.
Right, to sever
there are no bonds of kinship,
right.
There's to eliminate bonds of kinship in order to tie the worshiper specifically with the white Christ.
See, and that is a very interesting point, because you see that on social media where they're trying to say, oh, the rabbi Yeshua is not so pacifist because he said this. But if you read further, it's so that
it's not a sword to slay the foe. It's a sword to divide families.
To divide your own families apart.
Cut you apart from your parents and from your line of kinship.
Right. Because they could be good people, but if they don't accept the rabbi and the truth and the light and the way, they don't get in to the
Because man's not saved by deeds, but by faith alone, that none might boast.
Right. So
that's why our random side point here, and this will become more relevant later, and it's certainly relevant when we celebrate the ascendancy of King Athanaric. But recognizing the threat of Christianity to severing and disrupting kinship and clan and cutting people off and making them rootless was something that the wise amongst our ancestors noticed, and those who could break the fetters of the momentum of the time they were in stood against and tried to stem the tide of.
Yeah, and this kinship between folk, I think a lot of people try to utilize it against, say, if they're ideologically against us, they'll try to say, your people enslaved each other. Like, yes, slavery's been practiced all over the world by everyone. So ethnic groups would enslave ethnic groups, especially.
Posted the full passage from Matthew 10. I appreciate that, because everyone who's not familiar with their Bible, and I'm not trying to, believe me, this is not the program I'm trying to.
Well,
you know what? You should be familiar with it, so you know what that's about, because it's very far. It's very far from what I think a lot of Christians are aware of or would try to tell you. And I think this was a very, very clear thing we all should know. The Apostle Matthew, in that book, it says, Jesus says, do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies will be those of his own household. And I think that, we can't spread the good word, too much on that. I think the more we let that be known, the more clear and stark the choice between that and between anything else, but very specifically between that and between Asatru for our folk, is painted in very clear colors for us all. And I think we would do well to heed that.
Yeah, I think that's a good one to bear in mind when the intention of like, oh, we're not so pacifist. We should be, what are they, Templars or Knights, fighting for the Holy Land. And it's like, read the rest of that. it's not good.
It's literally warned against in the Voluspa as well as the beginning of Ragnarok.
Yeah, I saw that where you had posted, Nick, he posted the Voluspa where it says, in that brother shall fight brother, and that the bonds of family will be broken, and kinslaying is of course on the top of the list. But I digress. I just thought it was very funny.
But that's the thing about this little poem isn't when we restrict our lore to archaic stories of some old Vikings, that's fun and it's interesting. But I don't think enough people take note of the seriousness and the modern day relevance that the wisdom within it contains. And there is quite a bit more than people realize.
Well, and I think our ancestors, when Christianity was coming in, and especially with these women that were, because they made the groundwork before the sword. There was the woman, generally, bonds of marriage. There were, land grabs and usury that the church used quite often, but more often than not, it was about introducing women and moving them into, spots of power from elsewhere, mainland, from England.
How many guys do we know, you and I, Svan, that have come through the Asatru folk assembly and have quit and rejected everything they believed in for the attentions of a woman?
I can think of 6 right off the top of my head.
Lots and lots. It's one of the things Jehovah's Witnesses specifically target women in their door-to-door ministry in order to do that. If you plant that seed in the home and then the wife is persistent with her, truth is one of our values here, with her nagging, it leads men astray and it leads families astray. And I've seen it. They do it because it works. It is not an honorable tactic, but it is a smart tactic.
Right. Well, and I find it super interesting that to our ancestors, the utterance of a woman's death curse, or the curse that she places before death, or the long-lasting sense, like almost like in modern pop culture, in the movies where the witch is about to be burned, and she says her utterances to curse everyone there. That's a common trope that we are familiar with via movies, but this is kind of the same thing. I'm not saying that they were particularly killing or burning these Christian women, but the idea was that it was common enough that the audience would understand the value. And again, the idea of the curse upon death was already set. It's just that they tagged it in as a Christian women, because I guess there was a, that hit home. They did it enough. And I thought that was very, very funny. And also, I just read this down at the bottom. I really like that Bellows says, that many people try to change this. They were very distressed by the translation. They tried to say it was a witch, the dead witch, but it's clearly Christian dead woman. And I love how he says, The fact seems to be, however, that this particular charm was composed at a time when Christians were regarded by all conservative pagans as emissaries of darkness. That's awesome. Nowadays, you would never hear conservative and pagan often like laid in the same words. And I do get a lot of confusion from folks when I'm, I have many, Christian clients who, we see eye to eye on quite a few things. And then they find out that I'm Asatru. They find out that I believe in many gods, and it just throws them off. They immediately associate that with like postmodern Marxist, goobers. So, so in 14, then 9th will I chant thee, if needs thou must strive with a warlike giant in words. Thy heart good store of wit shall have, and thy mouth of words full wise. So now she's imbuing upon him the power that is reminiscent of a warlike giant. He will have the speech prowess that is, indomitable, and in his heart is of good wit. And I also find it really interesting that, the mentioning of the heart versus, say, the head. And I think that's because our ancestors did see intelligence in the head, but they also saw that there was more to simply deducing. There was kind of the feeling or the ability to affect people with your words, not based solely on your knowledge, but of also to your genuineness or your intensity or your desire, that your words were important, but they had to be backed by, heart, emotion, or the validity of the words needed to be placed based on how you did other things, how you presented yourself, and how you spoke about the things that you care about. And I really like that.
Words are wind, deeds are iron.
What's that? I didn't hear that. Nope.
Nick,
right.
We await your interjection.
Yeah, Nick, what did you say? I didn't hear it.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
We do hear you now.
Words are wind, deeds are iron. Your words need to be
right.
Your actions.
100%. Yeah. And two, just the idea that you can turn and sway folks with words, but if your heart's not in it, then it's not the same. Your heart has to be behind it. So let's see. And I love that warlike giant in words. That is, just awesome. The Ordum Skiptirjoten. So in 15, now fare on the way where danger waits. Let evils not lessen thy love. I have stood at the door of the earth-fixed stones, and while I chanted these charms, bear hence, my son, what thy mother hath said, and let it live in thy breast. Thine ever shall be the best of fortune, so long as my words shall last. So the attainment of the boon from beyond the grave is placed upon Svipde. And, she states that the spells will remain so long as her words last, as long as, her will is woven into his orlaw. And that's where this poem ends. And then he goes
Oh,
forth.
wait, there's more.
Yeah, but wait, there's more. This is the part 2 now where it transitions to Svipdag as he searches for Manglov. Yeah, and so, I just to let people know that there's a reason why there's like this gap here, but they're generally read the same. So let me see if I can go here.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, it's even listed as Svipdagsmál 2.
Part 2. So, let's hit the questions that we have while we're at the intermission here. The first one, because Swimming Tiger, I can't stay. What do you fellas think about Rydberg's poems where Svipdag turns into a dragon? The Norrena Society uses them as evidence that Svipdagur is Other Freya's husband. Svan, what are your thoughts on these poems?
I mean, right off the top of my head, let me see here. Are these poems written by Rydberg?
I just read the question. That's a Swimming Tiger question.
Yeah, so the only reason why this is not ringing right away is, and I'm wondering if these are Rydberg's poems. But actually, I don't think that that's far of a jump. And I'm in agreement. I do believe that that Svipdag is Otar and Other, and that Other is again eventually goes away, if you will, and that causes all of that. But I didn't know that, because you said in defense of. I didn't know that that was a point of defense. Though I do think that people, you like, how do you go from Svipdag to Otar to Other? But I mean, I was always of that mindset that Svipdag and Other were the same beings, perhaps in a different place. Like right now, Svipdag is in the middle world. He is in the world, whether he's in Jotunheim or in Midgard, he's still in the middle world. By the time he ascends, he becomes Other, and Other is when he's living in the heavenly realm. He has as an ascendant. And we see this again with Skirnir, and so we have this kind of, the idea is like there's ascendant heroes and then there's avatar heroes or avatars. And so mortals that rise up to the gods and live amongst them versus gods that come down to the earth in the form of men folk. And this is a confusing topic, and there's never really a lot that just contextualized straight to it. But I have always just taken that point because of the similarities between Ottar and Svipdag are kind of glaring, but Ottar is after the fact. So there's lots of speculations. Ottar is Odin, and again, people try to do that because Odin and Other sound the same. And I cannot emphasize enough that Old Norse, even if the words are very close to each other in the way that they sound, that does not mean that they share the same meaning. And it's also worth remembering that Lord Odin, that's a title. Odin, the Furious One, or Fury, and Other, which in modern Icelandic can also mean fury, but it also more lends to like inspiration and ecstatic knowledge. I think that the name Other fits because as he transcends, he becomes devoted to attaining the unattainable. Oftentimes you'll hear Asatru talk about like getting to know your Valkyrie, like the reflection of your soul that is the Freudian slip. No, it's a Freudian concept of the opposite side of your soul being feminine if you're a male, and male if you're feminine. What's that?
The shadow?
I don't know if it's the shadow. Is it? Does that have gender in his thing?
I don't know, and we could go into the Freudian thing, but the idea of the completion of self.
Right. With the opposite, if you're a male and you complete yourself by joining with the entity soul or the Valkyrie, or sometimes people say the Filkia is that opposite. This kind of is, again, once this joining, this union, once he goes on and ascends to be with the Holy Freya, he becomes other. He becomes the ecstatic inspiration, and I think that has more of a lending to that. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know about those poems, unless it's a lore poem. But the fact that you said Rydberg's poems,
it makes it sound like, and then Victor spake a verse, and he just busted out some like poetry about it. I think that we get stuck in a artificial position of enmity with Dr. Rydberg, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. The Norrena Society and us differ in quite a few ways, and because he's their guy, it's easy for him to be, for us to be on the other team, and he's a Crip and we're the Bloods or whatever. Right. And it's not like that. I don't discount that man's entire corpus of scholarship based on modern issues between us and some folks involved in a different approach to Asatru. So please don't ever take that we're like anti-Rydberg. I don't think that's certainly not my position.
Yeah, I try to caution people at the Hoff. Read Rydberg because his insights are just massive, but don't get caught up on the internet chatter that he is somehow a divine prophet, which is kind of what it feels like. They're going towards Snorri being kind of a divine nationalistic prophet, and Rydberg too. And these are all the same people that are kind of also mashing all of the gods into Odin. It doesn't make me hate the corpus of knowledge.
Well, it's one of those things. I get you got to rep your set. Like, I get that, but going back in time and making these strange alliances that's not fair. I think that Victor, as far as I know, I have no reason to think that there is any scholastic dishonesty in the works of Victor Rydberg. I don't know. I'm not an expert on the man, but I have no reason to be hostile. I just know that folks that we tend to take issue with how they practice Asatru in 2024 he's their guy. Just because he's their guy doesn't mean he's, the guy we're against. That's not a thing. Please don't think that. I don't think we have any inherent bias against the really pioneering work that Victor Rydberg did, because that's not the case at all. Honestly, with our beef with the Norrena Society, I don't dislike Mark Purrier. I like Mark right now. I would share one of these delicious beers with him and hang out with him, and I would give him a hug right now if he was here. I don't have any problem with him. He's always been a gentleman and very kind to me, and I would absolutely return the same. I've shared some McDonald's with him at one point, and got to, I don't, and I've talked to him many times. So it doesn't need to be a deeper conflict than it is.
See, and this is the part where I don't get to say this often, but Alice Harrogody is a nice person. I have problems with just the productions of the books and some of the heretical kind of things that were twisted and turned and continuously are. And now it's just throwing another wrench.
Oh, I have a problem with all of those things. Don't get me wrong. And there are members of that society, at least in the past. I don't keep track of their membership rolls, but I have significant personal grievance with. Mark's a nice guy, and I don't think he is intentionally. I don't think he is intentionally devious or intentionally trying to act against the ICER. I wouldn't put that charge on him at all. I do think some things are misguided, and I really wish that he was with us and part of what we're doing, moving Asatru into the future. And I think we would be better. I think his efforts would be better served if he got on the team. But yeah. Oh, and one time. I told this story already, but it's just such a ridiculous story. He was driving through. And he wanted to check out Odenshof way back, closer to when we first got Odenshof. And so he met my wife and I at Odenshof, and he comes in. He's like, "Hey, you want to see my monkey?" We're very, very perplexed at that proposition. I mean, on the chance there was an actual monkey, I think the only answer is yes. With some kind of strange euphemism, the answer is no and should be followed by violence. But no, it turns out he was traveling with an actual monkey. And there was this little monkey in a cage that he was transporting for a friend of his, I guess. And the monkey, it was time to feed him, and he was not pleased with the car ride. But sure enough, he rolled up and he had an actual monkey. So, it was neither here nor there, but it was a thing. Got a couple of other questions before we move on to part 2. And you may think we've been doing this a minute, but we really haven't. And part 2 is much longer than part 1. So get a snack, get a beverage, because we're in for a little bit. Also, planned snacks and beverages. There's 92 chapters to Egil Saga, and we're going to divide that by 4. So is what it is. We may have some long nights together in the month of December. So following on this question from last week we had a question about if a Christian could join the AFA, and this is a follow-up to that question. Watching a different live right now, but wanted to clarify a question I had last week. It wasn't about not being a committed Christian in questioning, but questioning when others keep saying that certain Christian observances are actually from ancestral practices. Be back later, and if not, happy Thanksgiving. Oops, too vague. Do you welcome those who want to discover for themselves about Asatru and those practices? Having trouble phrasing this here. Yeah, no, we get what you're saying. No, if you're sincere, as long as you're not lying to anybody, come check it out. I don't know where you're located, but what is the best is to come to one of our Hofs. It's not why we have them, but it's a benefit of us having them, is that folks who are interested can come and see what this is about and meet Asatru and get a more visceral feel for what we do. The question last week came about in terms of membership. And no, we would not want you to be a member of our church if you are of a different religion. I think that's common sense. But to attend and to see and to check things out and to look into it and, discover whether it rings true to you, certainly we'd invite you to do that. And I think we just want to be fair and open-handed with everybody. We'd love for all of our folk to come home to Asatru. And we have no expectation that sight unseen, you just buy into completely flipping the paradigm that you've lived this far of your life under. That's absolutely it. It can happen instantaneously, or it can be a long process. We respect that. So if you're somebody with sincere questions or sincerely wants to learn, we'd love to have you come to one of our hofs, or somebody locally could, walk you through it or invite you to a moot, or we could get that figured out. But I hope that clarifies a little bit.
I want to cover one thing about the lore that we just covered. So, and just kind of going along with, as was stated about Groa being a D-seer of vegetation, there certainly seems to be that there's a transcendency of Svipdag's parentage. His mother being Groa, or and I don't know if it's stated, but we do know that Groa is in another story, and she helps Lord Thor out. So now we've got this situation where Groa is not in, or is in the middle world. She's in Jotunheim, and she helps when Lord Thor gets a honing stone cracked in his head. She speaks spells over it, but then she sees her husband, who she thought was dead, that Thor saves him, and she stops, and the story leaves with Lord Thor having the honing stone, or the shard of stone in his head. And a lot of people believe that this may lead to the reason why there is nail often posted in God posts. But her husband's name is Arvindel. And Arvindel is mentioned as that when they cross the rivers, they throw his toe into the sky, and we see this with Thiazi's eyes. So this is a common thing in which the story states that the gods throw something into the sky and it becomes the star. We still don't know exactly what star is Arvindel's toe. Most likely it's probably Sirius, because it, lending his name meaning like light of the east. So probably that, but it just kind of, again, places them in a world in between Jotuns and gods and men. And in this case, or at least by this time, Svipdag was definitely seen as more than simply a man. But Groa as well, and Arvindil. The reason why, too, is that's the same name that J.R.R. Tolkien used for the elf Arendil, if anybody's familiar with that, or at least heard it and was like, wait a minute, that sounds very familiar. That's where some of the more of pop culture that comes from. But I just wanted to state that Groa is elevated in some way. If the term Dis is fitting, and it may be, she is now elevated and presides over. So she goes through the.
Why would she not be if we refer to great grandma that passed as one of the Disir?
Right. That's what Svipdag going to her. Well, I'm only saying that in the sense that people.
I apologize. I said that as a question. Yes, I will stipulate that Groa is a Dis, and one of the D-seer.
Right. I like the idea of saying a
Big D
D
or little D is the question. Keep it clean in the chat room.
Well, one thing is like the way it was termed as Dees of vegetation. What we do see about the D-seer is that they preside over their bloodlines. It is so important that we consider who we marry and who we have children with, because our D-seer can turn off the faucet. They twist the fates. They can turn off the faucet. They can turn it on, and they can give you the boon. And they're kind of intermediaries between the ancestors and humanity, and sometimes even the gods. So the idea that she is mortal and she dies, and then she is elevated through the root and placed in the position as a Dis over her line, including starting with her son, Svipda, and now he is seeking knowledge from his Dis mother through the grave. Fits 100% in. I was only bringing that up just because the Dis of vegetation, Dis kind of often is thrown around too. Sometimes it's like a god, but they're really, the twisters of fate.
That's what I'm saying. There's, as far as the elevation of mortals and the ascendancy, there is a spectrum there that doesn't. There's many stages of ascendancy betwixt God and man. Just because one is more than a mortal man doesn't make them have some equivalency to the great gods of our race. There is a position there for elevated heroes and heroines and for honored and ascended ancestors that's in between there in that space. And I think that the elevation of some of these that we hear in our sagas and our lores, in our sagas and our lore, clearly are people who have ascended to something more beyond the grave, but that are clearly not the Aesir, but have a relation to them that is perhaps closer than ours is as mortals in Midgard during our lifetime. So the other thing that we've got, well, we got a couple other things. Sierra wants to know what we are thankful for, both of us. Svan, what are you thankful for?
This is really funny. Me and my family and our neighbors, who are also assembly members and live right down the street from us, we go on night walks every night. And this was actually kind of something that was instigated by my wife. And at first I was just like, oh, I don't know, but it's kind of turned into a really good thing. And every night, we walk, it takes about an hour or so, and we walk a little over a mile with the kids, and we each state 3 things that we are thankful for. So, as you go, you start to think about different things, and you become pretty, you're going into the nitty-gritty details of your life. So the question here would be very broad, as opposed to, I think, like, I'm thankful for this specific client who helped me out in this situation. But I am thankful that there is so much. I'm thankful that there's the pause that we've taken to consider our thankfulness. I would encourage people to do that more. So I know it sounds kind of corny, but I'm thankful for being thankful. And I mean that in the sense that since we've been doing these walks, I have been scrutinizing my day and trying to figure out what I'm thankful for, how I'm thankful for it, the deficits that are in kind of, wash away when you just really start to focus on the positive things that you gained, small little things. And we do it every day. So, I mean, like my instinct initially is just like to give thanks for what I'm thankful for today. Cause I didn't go on the walk. I'm on the podcast. So, I missed out on the thankfuls. But right now I'm most thankful for the discerning mind to realize the things I have, the things I do not. And instead of focusing simply on the things I do not have, which some could be good, whether it's illness or problems of a different nature, instead of focusing even in the negative or the deficit, focusing on the positive, having a roof over my head, a loving wife, loving children that are healthy and happy, it's so important, but there's too much to list in one, singular moment. But I am thankful to have that discerning mind of walking through the world, experiencing these things, and then tallying them up and actually saying them, realizing them. And I would not have had that if it wasn't for my wife's instigation of these walks of thankfulness is kind of what they've turned into. There's far too much to count, but I would say that most.
That's really cool. That's a neat thing that she did. I don't know. Give Catherine a high five for me.
High five.
But
she's off screen.
Well, good. It's a good idea, Catherine. I'm glad you came up with that. It is humbling when the question gets asked. I have more things in my life than I would have ever dreamed to be thankful for. It's hard because I overthink questions. Sometimes people are, what are you thankful for? This beer is delicious. I'm thankful for it. Sure. And I am. It really is delicious beer. It was left by a guest at the last moot we had over here. But this horn was gifted to me by a really good friend of mine, Daniel Young, because Thorshoff was the first Hoff under my administration that we got. It was the first Hoff to our gods that I could be the one to dedicate. And that was such an important moment in my life that they won this horn and he gifted it to me. The friends that I've made in the Asatru Folk Assembly on a personal level, I'm tremendously thankful for. These are people that are my family, that are everything to me. And dude on the other end of this, actually both gentlemen on the other end of this, the ones you can see and the ones that we don't end up looking at, we hear from on occasion, very thankful to these men. They're genuinely some of my very closest friends and people that are all in on making this happen and share in the daily joys and daily toil of this work that we do. The tremendous honor of being the All-Sarier Gothi of the Asatru Folk Assembly. There's no way I could properly express how thankful I am for that. The fact that so many people who listen to this podcast come up to me and, tell me how much they enjoy it or how it meant something really important to them in a moment in their life where they needed to hear something that we said. The blessings of our gods have poured out on me and my family in ways that I can't properly acknowledge all of. I'm extremely thankful for my lovely wife, Mandy, for my amazing daughter, Aubrey. Mandy and I kind of, we keep it real. We embrace the truth as one of our core values. But we were talking, and a lot about kids, like, man, what if our kid was ugly, or man, what if our kid was, misbehaved, or what if we, everybody likes their kids, but what if ours was lame? No, realistically, there's no such thing as perfection, but I don't think that in any realistic scenario we could come any closer than Aubrey. She is fantastic. She is absolutely amazing. I'm amazed by her every single day. I'm extremely thankful for so much in my life, and I couldn't possibly cover all of it. So we got that. We've got 2 more questions before we'll go into the other and longer of the 2 poems that we're going into tonight. From Gothy Trent East, question for both of you, and just another additional plug. Trent's lovely wife, Madison, is responsible for making those amazing AFA calendars that are now on sale at runestone.org. Get yours today. That said, question for both of you. I'll hear your Gothy and Witan Svan. What is your favorite Thanksgiving dish? Svan, go.
Ooh. Okay, this is going to sound funny, but it's stuffing. I have a interesting thing, even a Mandela effect, if you will. When I came to the United States, my first Thanksgiving dinner, we had lamb skull or lamb's head. My mother made it, but we had never really had Thanksgiving before. So I remember my friend, neighbor, 2 houses down, the young kid comes in, sees the sheep head on the table, and then turns around and immediately leaves. He was terrified. But I remember eating Stouffer's stovetop stuffing. Excuse me. And we were eating it out of the pot on the top of the oven, and we just couldn't believe that it was bread. It was it's not just bread, but it's bread. And never had it. And it was, and my father thought that was very, very funny. And so stuffing has always been and I don't really eat it any time of year other than Thanksgiving. And it's so good. But apparently Stouffer's stovetop stuffing has never existed. And I remember in my childhood, the red box with the
ball hockey.
Nope, it doesn't exist. It's actually, supposedly it's a Mandela effect on that conspiracy, because Stouffer's has never made dried goods. It always makes frozen foods. But when I was a kid, I remember seeing the box with the black circle that says Stouffer's on it. Nope. Actually, it's made by Kraft, which kills me, because that's, yeah. Anyways, I remember driving to, we were actually going to a national event. We were watching some video, this guy is called Y-Files, and he did one on Mandela effects, and we're driving along, and I'm like, oh, yeah, and then they said the stovetop stuffing, and it shattered my reality for at least an hour. I was just quietly driving and cursing everything. I have such a clear memory of it. And because not being part of it and being from Iceland and coming here, and it was a hybrid Thanksgiving / just strange Icelandic food that my mom was able to get. And yeah, so stuffing.
No, now you've got me on the whole Mandela effect of it, rabbit hole on it. So
I know.
I'm not gonna belabor you guys with that. Svan, please tell me that tomorrow you are serving some of your children
Lamb's head,
krutsupa or whatever the like lamb's head delicacies of your homeland.
No, actually, one of the things I'm intending to do is I want to butterfly a turkey breast out and fill it with mashed potatoes and stuffing and green bean casserole, and then roll it up and into a roast, and then cut it and serve it as a pinwheel. So it's just like the whole meal inside a turkey breast, and then garnished with mashed potatoes and stuffing.
That sounds awesome. I'm disappointed about the lack of
lamb's head.
Yeah, you got to eat the lamb's head.
I know that when we move to Sigerheim, I know you're going to be like, you're going to have me cooking the weirdest crap.
You got to. That's the delicacies of your homeland.
I'm going to have like hankakjöt and, like lamb's head and haukarl and all the other like strange things that you can just come over and
rotten shark. That's gross. And you can keep the like testicles. I'm not going to eat testicles.
Well,
that's one of those things. It's not what I do.
Hankakjöt, I think you would like because it's just condensed lamb, and then the other is harðarfiskur. Harðarfiskur, I think you would really like, but everyone hates it when I eat it.
What?
Hard fish. Yeah, it's my friends call it whale scabs, and it makes the whole house smell like cod. But it is so good when you like dried fish with like butter on top.
No, I'm down. Let's do that. So I don't like soggy bread. I don't have super exotic Thanksgiving delicacies. I really like just being simple. I like gravy and turkey and that can-shaped
cranberry
sauce that looks like the can. I've had fancier kind that's way more gourmet, but no, I want mine to look like the can that it came in.
It has to have the ridges.
It's got to. That's how you know it's legit. And mashed potatoes and gravy. I mean, growing up, we always had
ground up clown.
I mean, that might be delicious. I don't know. So growing up, we always had succotash, which there's fancier versions. My mom always just made frozen corn and frozen lima beans, but it was good. I'll eat fancy green beans, where I'll cook up green beans with like the little slivered almonds and and bacon. That's always good. I'm not as fancy as some people are. I've never been the huge pumpkin pie guy. Like I will eat any dessert. Don't get me wrong, but that's never my pie of choice. My pie of choice for Thanksgiving's always been cherry, which is not usually the one on offer. So that was kind of a special thing. My parents and grandparents made sure I had. That's what I got. We got one more I said before we're going to go into the next deal. Is Odin the same being as Indra? Both mythologies describe them as king of the gods. No, and I don't think I think the Vedic evolution of religiosity varies in different ways than some of the more one-for-one European expressions. I think Indra is often much more similar to Asatru. There are, depending on where you're at, there are so many what the supreme or the top of the food chain in the Vedic gods are. It all depends on kind of where you're at and what's what. But no, I don't think that Indra is the one that bears most similarity to Odin at all. I think Indra bears the most similarity to Asatru.
Ooh, this question I think I saw earlier, and I like to answer this too.
Please.
I kind of know where this is coming from. I made mention of like the cramming of of Lord Odin and all the gods. But one of the distinct differences between the Asatru Folk Assembly and the other groups that are kind of like, I need to find the singular Sky Daddy, is that we talk about the tripartite and the thrones, and that each of the Aryan groups have these thrones of need and emphasis, and the gods, who are the gods, fill these thrones. And for us to think that there's this unilateral sense, when we could see that it's not even unilateral amongst the Nords, where in Uppsala, where Lord Thor is in the center of the tripartite and on the highest altar, and he is, flanked by the Holy Frey and by Lord Odin. So we see that these desires and the idea that the gods kind of move around. But I will tell you one thing that always seems to happen is that there is a Sky Father and an Earth Mother, and after they establish the structure of the world and of heaven, they then create, or I'm not saying create, but the substance of the three thrones or the tripartite, and its division is always something that happens. So, we see this with in our stories with Bor and with Bestla, and then after them the tripartite forms. We see this amongst the Hindus with I think it's Dios Pater and or Dies Pater. I don't know how it's said, but yeah, the Heavenly Father or Shining Father and Mother, and then the tripartite happens, and we have Indra and Agni and Varuna, I believe. We see this amongst the Slavs. There is that creation point between the heaven and the earth is stratified. The heaven and the earth split; they're held apart, and then Svarog, Perun, Veles show up. Or we see it amongst the Gauls with Teratatis, Tyrannus, and Assus, and so on and so forth. We even see it amongst the Etruscans, who are a hybrid peoples that, again, most of their genetic origins coming off the coast of Italy, but they were so entwined with other Aryan groups, they had a tripartite. So the bigger thing to think about is these thrones have value amongst the people, and the gods fill those values. They give unto the people that which they need. They end up fulfilling. And those three thrones I always talk about are the dynamic throne, the static throne, and the catalytic throne. And it varies depending on the people. Some people have dynamicism as the height of their worldview. Others have stasis, like the Slavs. Svarog sits above and watches all below and does not move. And Veles and Perun are the dynamic, Veles is dynamic and Perun is catalytic. So to go across and take all of them and then just start to cram them in, I don't think is the correct way to do it. I also don't think it's the true point of observation. I think observation is about, again, observing how the gods work. And if we try to cram the gods outside of what we can clearly see, is where we start to get faulty. The biggest point to understand is that all of the stories of all of the Aryan branches are deeply cultural reflections of the way that gods work in our world. And the Aryan gods are Aryan gods. And amongst those different branches, those gods have different emphasis because of the relationship that they have with their people.
So, all right, last question we got, and then we're going to get into round 2 here. So, Svan, be prepped and ready. On this one, Croatian War Master. This might not be related to the poem, but are poetry and songs to the gods used in the services at the Hofs? Not as often as they should be. It would be really cool if we had more song and poetry involved. A lot of it doesn't exist yet, and we would, we await a day when that does happen. There is a chant song, if you will, that gets done at every Odenblot that I do, which is the Herjafather song. That gets used in ritual a lot. Where I see song and poetry happen most often is in Sumbel at the Hofs. We'll have people that'll compose a poem or recite a poem. Every now and again, someone who will sing a song. We have a song that gets sung in our Disablot at winter nights that happens. So it does happen. I would love to have more of that happen. It kind of needs to happen organically. But yeah, those two examples I mentioned are mainstays, and I'd love to see more of that develop as we go further. But with that, Svan, if you would take us into Svipdagsmál Part 2.
Okay. So at this point now, we will see some, again, very common heroic or Aryan heroics mythoses that are going to play out. We see this again with Holy Frey when he goes to send Skirnir to pledge for a meeting with the Ástvanir Gerður. So these are just common things. As he's coming to the house, he meets a guardian, if you will. And I looked up the translation on his name, and they generally translate it to all wise. But the closest translation that I could find towards it is mountain wise, which would lend to this idea that Fjölsvið might be a Jotun. And I wonder if this part of this story is actually a section of Something Lost, in which the Holy Freya is captured by Jotuns, and it is Svipdag who goes and transcends even the mortal world to go and free her. But I mean, we may not know. So in one, before the house, he beheld one coming to the home of the giants high. Svipdag speaks. What giant is here in front of the house? And around him fires are flaming. This is very similar to Skirnir, where he speaks to the Jotun on the hill, and he says that you're never going to get past the fire barrier. And Fjölsvið, which again they say means greatly wise, but that I'm really looking to try to figure out where they found that or figured that translation, as I've always kind of Fjöl or Fjol as a derivative of Fjall, which means a mountain. So I'm looking into that right now. That one kind of threw me for a loop. And he says, the Jotun says, "What seekest thou here? For what is thy search? What friendless one fain wouldst thou know? By the ways so wet must thou wander hence? For, weakling, no home hast thou here." So it's immediately aggressive. Why are you here? What are you looking for? You have no friends here. You have no kin in this place. Why would you travel the roads, besmirched by rain and wind to get here? And such a tiny little weakling as yourself, you don't even live here. You have no place to claim here. Svipdag says, "What giant is here in front of the house, to the wayfarer welcome denying. Playing in again, too, the idea that our ancestors held great value in hospitality. And it's clear that Fjölsvið is not hospitable at all. So he's kind of jibing at the fact that the house could be, the insult could be levied against the house, that it is, not good. And I also, interesting thing about the translations on the Icelandics or the old Norse side is that Fjölsvið is not mentioned, but that it's Komenmaður, and then he's also referred to as Borgarvarður, or like word of the mountain, or word. I don't know. This is like just now hitting me that these translations, because we don't prep for this show, so like now I'm like, oh, I really need to look into that. So Fjölsvið speaks and he says, "Greetings, full fare, thou shalt never find. So hence shalt thou get thee home." Yes, what's in the house, or what's the quickest way to the house? You back the way you came, is basically what he's giving him. You'll find no greetings here, and the only home that you have for thee is the one you left this morning. And he continues, he says, "Fjölsvið am I, and wise am I found." And I think that's why one of the translations they're saying like mighty wise. But I think mountain wise, again, mountains were definitely associated with the Jotuns, and their time before the gods on Midgard. And he says, "Fjölsvið am I, and wise am I found, but miserly am I with meat. Thou never shalt enter within the house. Go forth like a wolf on thy way." So here he's talking about the feast, and that like you'll find no joy coming here. And the interesting thing about the translation of meat is an Anglo-Saxon word that meant meal. It just meant to eat. It didn't only speak of flesh of an animal. But I find that those translations are very interesting when you get into some of those details. It was later on that English transformed to have meat mean flesh. And he says, like make like a wolf and just keep, loping by. And of course is referring to the fact that he is a wolf, or that he is this kind of unwanted consumer. And Svipdag speaks, he says in 5, "Few from the joy of their eyes will go forth, when the sight of their loves they seek. Full bright are the gates of the golden hall, and a home shall I here enjoy." So, he's motivated by love. That's his ultimate quest. And so even though it's dark, and even though there's a menacing Jotun at the front, and there are flames ringing the house, it is the love of his heart and his desire that will allow him to supersede these problems. And then Fjölsvið speaks. He says, "Tell me now, fellow, what father thou hast, and the kindred of whom thou camest." Svipdag says, "Vindkald am I, and Varkald's son, and Fjölkald is his father." It's very interesting here, and most likely he's not revealing his true name, but in actuality he's obfuscating his true name, with the intention that you should never give your true name to an adversary, and that names have power. So, he says, "I am wind cold." And again, this references Vindkald, or Vindkaldur, is that he just came from the road. So it's a travel name. It's a name that emphasizes that he is traveling. I am wind cold, and Varkald and is my father, and Fjölkald is his father. And in 7, Fjölsvith says, "Now answer me this." Sorry, excuse me, it's the other way around. Svipdag says, "Now answer me this, Fjölsvith, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. Who is it that holds and has for his own the rule over this hall so rich?" And Fjölsvith says, "It's Menglov is she. Her mother bore her to the son of Svarthorin, the Black Thorin." There's really nothing known of that name, but to the son of Svarthorin, she is it that holds and has her own the rule of the hall so rich. And Svipdag says, "Now answer me, Fjölsvith, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. What call they the gate? For among the gods never saw man so grim a sight." So now they're talking about the great palisade or portcullis, I should say, that's like blocking the way into the courtyard or into the hall, and it has a name, and it's Thrimgjol, they call it. 'Twas made by the 3, the sons of Solblindi, and fast as a fetter the fairer it holds, whoever shall lift the latch. So this is an interesting part. The name Thrimgjol. Thrimgjol means like a direct translation would be more like a cacophonous wailing. And poetically, this is most likely talking about like when you raise the gate and there's this grinding, screeching of metal on metal, just because of the sheer weight and size of it. So it is the cacophonous screeching, or when it lands on the ground, perhaps it means that this is the kind of the same thing. Again, those poetics are interesting because the word gyol is used in a lot of different ways, and they don't always have the same kind of exact meaning because of the poetics. But yes, most likely it's so big that it slams against the ground, or it's so big that when it's pulled up, it cries out when it grinds. And this is another one. It was made by the 3 sons of Solblindi. Now, Solblindi, or sunblind, is a Dvargar name, especially in consideration to their reactions to the sun. So it was forged by dwarves. And if anyone tries to lift the latch, they will be rooted in place as fast as a fetter. The fairer it holds, whoever shall lift the latch. So anyone trying any funny business is going to get locked into place. I really like that, especially for those who are fans of Tolkien. You can clearly see where he got a lot of his inspiration from. So Svipdag speaks, and he says in 11, "Now answer me this, Fjölsvith, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. What call they the house, for no man beheld, mongst the gods so grim a sight?" Fjölsvith speaks and says, It's Gastropnir. Of old I made it from the limbs of Leirbrimr. I braced it so strongly that fast it shall stand so long as the world shall last. So I I have often wondered if Leirbrimnir is some sort of kenning for the corpse of Ymir, and that because it's from the limbs of Leirbrimnir, and so I don't know because it's not really utilized anywhere else, but I'm of the farther that things go back to Ymir, the farther things are, the more archaic, the more primordial. And so I think he's really trying to state this is, shaped from the bones and the body of Ymir. And Ymir has a lot of different names, like Aurjelmur, and all of those names have Aur meaning like shaping by clay, or generally used when you're shaping with dirt and dust and brick or water, of the earth. So Leir meaning like clay, and Brimmir is one of the common usages of names for Jotuns. So this one down in the translations here, he translates Gastropnir as the end of the quest, or the quest crusher, which is like the end of the line, the last place you'll ever see, or what have you.
The final boss.
The final boss. Yes, the end where you go no further from here. That's pretty metal. But yeah, and he does emphasize it. I've never seen such a terrible place. So really the idea is, here is Svipdag. He's been blessed by his mother, who is now a Disir, or she's a powerful witch that can move outside or beyond the coils of mortality. And then he rides into Jotunheim, and he goes before this terrible dark castle that's surrounded in flames, and there's this guardsman waiting there. And you see this so much in other Aryan forms. It may be different because, again, each Aryan branch really does focus on different things that they need. That's why the tripartite and the gods filling the tripartite is different. And it doesn't lessen or cheapen the gods. It's just that they're answering the prayers of their people. So we see the stories of heroes like this kind of repeating, but sometimes, they will win by cunning, or they'll win by combat, like with the Green Knight in the Arthurian legends. So, but it's always kind of the same thing, is there is this quest, there is a place, and then within that place, there is a woman, the love of a woman, or the gifting of mead. We see this with Lord Odin and Gunnlod. So, again, it's very, very common, and is the audience that's listening to the story is enticed because of the familiarity of the idea of these heroics. So Svipdag says in 13, now answer me this, Fjölsvin, the question I ask, for now the truth I would know. And remember that those repetitive lines that happen are for the skald, or the bard or the poet, to remember where he is. It's kind of like a counting system. What call they the hounds that before the house so fierce and angry are? This is completely the same as when Skirnir goes to speak to Gerður. He speaks to the herdsman, and he says, like, if you're not only are the fire is going to burn you up, the hounds will rip you apart. So these, again, very common points of heroicism. So he speaks, and Fjolsvid says in 14, Giver they call one, and Geri they call the other. If now the truth thou wouldst know, great they are, and their might will grow, till the gods of death are doomed. So some folks try to kind of, like, if they see wolves in different stories, they're all kind of interconnected, which, I mean, in a way they are through their power of mythos, but he's basically saying, like, they will grow stronger and stronger and stronger until the Jotuns are called to assault the gods. I've always found it interesting. Give is very close to gift or gift, which means to give. But give kind of, it denotes more like when we say, like, gimme. It's greedy. And so is Geri. Geri is also to be greedy. So there, and again, that's just denoting to wolves and their hunger. Our ancestors were agrarian, and they had herds, and nothing symbolizes the demon more than the wolf. And that's another thing, lending back to what you had said, Asatru. One of the interesting things is that hell is free and is given stewardship over the organization of the ancestors and how they move back and through the cosmos. Jormungandr is fettered by himself, which is a grand irony. And then Fenris, who is brought right into heaven, has to be manually fettered with a great sacrifice by the gods. So that I find that interesting too. When you were talking about it, I was like, yeah, thinking about the tri-levels and how each one is kind of given. Some would, could say, like, hell is fettered by her place, but given great honors, and not really imprisoned. And then it kind of goes up from there. So in 15, Svipdag says, now answer me, Fjolsvid, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. May no man hope the house to enter while the hungry hounds are sleeping? So he's probing right now to see if there's, kind of any weaknesses. And of course, Fjolsvid says, no, there's no weaknesses. Fjolsvid speaks in 16, together they sleep not. For so was it fixed when the guard to them was given. One sleeps by night, the next by day. So no man may ever enter. And Svipdag says, now answer me, Fjolsvid, the question I ask. For now the truth would I know. Is there no meat that men may give them and leap within while they eat? Fjolsvid says in 18, 2 wing joints there be in Vidofnir's body. If now the truth thou wouldst know, that alone is the meat that men may give them and leap within while they eat. So now we've got, a weakness. And we, let me see here. Yeah, Vidofnis Leadham, his wings, or his, interesting. So he kind of finds the weakness, and he goes forth and says, Svipdag says, now answer me this, Fjolsvid. The question I ask, for now the truth I would know, what call they the tree that cast abroad its limbs over the land? Fjolsvid speaks and says, Mimamaith is its name, and no man knows what roots beneath it runs, and few can guess what shall fell the tree, for fire nor iron shall fell it. So this makes more sense that the name, because if you think back to Alvismal, each of the realms name components to cosmology differently. And in this case here, we talk about the tree that is in heaven that cascades over all existence. To the Jotuns, they call it Mimir's tree, and that's because there's one significant root that runs into Jotunheim. It is the receptacle of memory. Erd pours forth Orlog and time, and the gods are again presiding over it in cosmic order, and then it flows through Midgard and it works all of its many multifaceted processes, and then it flows into Mimir's well. And that is where Lord Odin placed his eye so that he could see all that has happened, perhaps if he had missed something. So it makes sense that they would call this Mimir's tree, but it is Yggdrasil overhanging Jotunheim. And again, that's just the emphasis that Yggdrasil is the cosmological circulatory system. It reaches in, and it's, nobody knows how deep the roots go and where they go fully, save one, the one who has placed himself upon the tree. But that it presides through all the worlds. It stretches in all places. And these three major roots are the ones that, one goes down into Niflheim and just beyond Helgard, and it draws up. And so the ascendancy of the dead coming from the lower realm, the place that's kind of outside of the jurisdiction of the gods, or at least outside of, it's always been there. It's the ancient world of Niflheim. Is the perfect place to kind of set things that are, it's outside of the jurisdiction of like everything in a way. It's a perfect safe zone. And then with the root drawing up, it brings elements back up into the heavenly realm. But it still does spread into Jotunheim. And it's never stated, but I would presume also Vanaheim.
It is the matrix of our reality, something really important about. And again, it's not a tree. It's a thing that is the context for our existence. But it has roots in deeds in the past, in things that are fed to it. Those roots and things that are fed to it go throughout its veins, all the way through to its leaves. They feed how it flourishes or how it doesn't flourish, whether it's stricken with blight and it withers and rots, whether it's strong and healthy and verdant and abundant. The world tree being the context of our reality and our existence, illustrated through the tree imagery a lot to our ancestors, and illustrates much to us today. What we put into the well affects the tree. What we lay into Mimir's well, through our deeds, through our actions, through our nobility or lack thereof, shapes our existence and how healthy or how malignant it might be. Every act of piety, every act of righteousness, every act of nobility we do, especially if done consciously and with intent, nourishes that tree, nourishes Yggdrasil, nourishes our reality, and makes it something more healthy, more vibrant, more beautiful, more healthy for those to come. The idea of holiness was identical in the archaic past to the idea of health. Those two words come back to the same root and the same starting point. When we are made whole, when we are healthy, we are most holy. The idea of this, all that we do should work together and function together. The circulation of the tree, the idea that leaves fall, they fall to the base, they go back into the well, they nourish the tree grows up, and the present feeds the past, becomes the present, becomes our future, is really an eloquent way of describing that sacred concept of our existence. And not just our existence in the material, but in a very holy, in both senses of the word, context. And I think it's really important to note here some of the meat of so much of these poems that we read. The story itself matters and is cool and useful and strengthens our faith in particular deities or in particular applications of our values. But the picture it paints should affect the lens in which we view the world as we approach it, the lens in which we see one another, the lens through which we see our gods, the lens through which we see Asatru and the future that we leave for our children. I think it's worth noting here. I know it seems kind of random, but when we mention Yggdrasil, it's worth noting these things. Also, as kind of a side note, as we have a page break here between this and the next 5 stanzas, I wanted to note, in case he disappears or may have other things to do, I say he, I don't know. TCG, does the AFA look down on or condemn at-home practice once joined, such as my family and I's bloats held on different dates? I don't know what kind of bloatar you and your family do, so I can't say definitively, but no, as a general rule, of course not. We would love to have at-home practice. Our gods getting worship is good. Them getting more worship is more good. Them getting less worship is less good. Now, assuming those bloatar are good and coming from a right place and devoted to our Aesir, of course we don't look down on that. We celebrate that. That's fantastic. That should be strengthened and in turn strengthen our public practice when you bring the Haminya that you've built from your home practice, you and your family, to our Hofs. You share that with the rest of us when we stand with you in ritual. When you unite with us through doing home practice, we're all made better because of it. So, no, we don't look down on that at all. And I just wanted to make that clear in case, you may go on your way this evening. I know it's getting late depending on where you are. Yeah, that was a little bit more of an aside than it needed to be, but I think it was, worth mentioning. And these Firestone Parabolita salted caramel beverages that I'm consuming are 9.2. So I waxed poetic.
Got the jet
No, I
fuel
appreciate them. They're really good, and they were brought by a relatively new member that came and joined us at our most recent dinner, and I appreciate that. So appreciate you, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's also worth noting that, like for Yule, almost the entirety of Yule, except for Mother's Night, is celebrated. Like Mother's Night is generally when we get together and we light the Yule log together and we unite in that light. But the rest of Yule is generally done at home, so it's even in our structuring of one of the biggest holy tides.
It is, and it's a unique and a really special challenge that we have to contemplate home practice versus Hof practice. Approaching this, and I don't know, TCG, I have no idea who you are or your familiarity with Asatru, but until 2015, we didn't have a Hof. Everything was some version of home practice, maybe with guests, maybe not. But it's only relatively recently that we're able to also practice in temples to our gods. In our ancestors' day, and in the sagas and the times that we often read about in the lore, aside from maybe seasonal gatherings or whatever, so much of their practice was done at home. So no, we don't look down on that or minimize it at all. And to do this right, one of the things that I'm very proud of about Asatru that differentiates it from some other religious practice that we may be more familiar with, it's not just something that you do on, the one day a month that we have a holy tide at the Hof. It should be integrated into your family. Everybody takes a strange and deviant sexual connotation to the lay of Rig. It's not about sexuality. It's about inviting the Aesir into your home, into your marriage, into the relationship you have with your wife, and into the very fabric of bringing your children into the world and raising them up to adulthood, is imbuing them with relationship through the gift cycle with the Aesir. So the fact that you do home practice, we would never ask you to stop that. I just wanted you to be real sure on that. I don't know if that's a point that needed to be cleared up, but if it did, I wanted to make sure we did so.
I do think there is another layer to this question, though, and that's the differentiation between Gothic-led practice and not Gothic-led practice.
Gothic,
yes.
yeah. Just to not get confused with Gothic people and or the architecture.
And are both, because their lineage is laid into the well of Mimir. So that said, no, realistically, the thing that might be confusing, and this isn't to your question. Your question may be one and done, but there may be others listening. The ideal, the best circumstance when we're all together as a community is, yes, we want our Gothar, our priests, performing the sacred rites for the community. But that doesn't preempt when, in the absence of that, you performing those rites in your home for your family. I think that's a confusion, and I don't think it's taken poorly. I think it's because of the evolution of our faith and where we're at. We've just recently had priests in a very formal way, or in a way where they're distributed across Midgard, in as well as they are, and there's still places that are very far from our Gothar. The idea is it's good to maintain the gift cycle with our gods. You as an Aryan man, Aryan woman, should, on your own, engage in that gift cycle when you're able. When we do it as a community, yes, it's best done under the auspices of our Gothar, because that's the right order of things and it's most potent, but it doesn't negate you doing that on your own at your house with your family. And I think that because one is optimal doesn't make the other one bad. And I think that's our people are really, we struggle with nuance. When one thing is preferred, people take that to mean everything else is forbidden or bad. Or when, man, I like chocolate cake. You mean you hate vanilla cake? No, I love cake. Cake is delicious. I prefer chocolate. there's no reason to go that route. And I appreciate you bringing it up, Nick, because I think it's a very relevant point. But no, we don't look down on your home practice at all. Solid fact. Matt loves cake. He does. But if you're going to give Matt cake, he prefers an ice cream cake if cake is happening. But any cake will do because it's delicious. But no, realistically, and with the point of what you asked, home practice is awesome. You should do that as well as public practice. And as Svan mentioned, so much of the Yule celebration is done in the home with primarily home practice. But Svan, what do you got?
Oh, I was just going to add this too. One of the big differences between, say, home or non-Gothic practices is the processes of gifting versus blessings received. So oftentimes what you will see with Gothar is that they, as a representative of the folk in their entirety, with the authority that is given to them by the Asatru Folk Assembly and its long initiatory traditions, the Gothar will distribute, or first they will ask for the worthiness of blessing and then distribute blessing. Whereas you'll find in a lot of like, say, home gifting cycles, and I even do it too. It's kind of funny. Like when I'm at the Hof, I feel that ability, but when I'm at home, I generally just gift. I place the mead into the bowl, and then I pour the bowl out after the bloat is done, because again, the distributing of blessings can be different, and it's not that it's not done, it's just that it's done differently under different circumstances. The Gothar are, again, taking upon themselves the mantle of being a representative of the people in a house that was built by the AFA, or again, built in symbolic sense and sometimes quite literal sense, in dedication to the gods, which are not around. There's no like official places other than in the Asatru Folk Assembly dedicated to the gods of the Germanic people. And we have done that. So when the Gothar are there in that capacity and authority, gaining the blessings from all of that Orlog that has worked towards those achievements is a huge deal. Whereas, generally when I'm doing smaller bloats, I just gift. I gift the bowl of mead over. Once it's placed inside the flout bowl, I don't really, mess with that. That's a gift to them. So that, I think, is one little subtle difference between the two. Sorry, I just realized I am floating alone in space. Okay, so the next part here that we're moving into is going to be really, really interesting because there's mentioning in lore that is, not common. So Svipdag says, "Now answer me, Fjolsvid, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. What grows from the seed of the tree so great that fire nor iron shall fell it?" Now, this is very important. These two stanzas are extremely important within the large overall ethos of the church. Fjolsvid speaks, he says, "Women sick with child shall seek its fruit to the flames to bear. Then out shall come what within was hid. And so is it mighty with men." So there is an important reason why the Asatru Folk Assembly sees Yggdrasil in its proper place, that it was not a mistake, that Snorri wasn't trying to make some allegoric, gotcha moment. No. Bor lifts heaven and separates the sky from the earth. And in doing so, on the top of heaven's mountains, there is a tree. And Ausgardr is there as well. But it is not, it's the entirety of heaven. And the roots from heaven descend down into all the other worlds. Is it actually a tree? We've already discussed that. No, it's the circulatory system of our reality and all realities. And most importantly, when the well of earth, which is in heaven, and again, the way things kind of work is that which is above is hierarchically, controlling or predecessing that which is below it. So the gods give unto us, and the tree gives unto us, and thus mankind is made in the middling world. And then our lives here then turn towards ancestors and, governs their inner, or well, in a way too, they govern our interceding, who's allowed in. And then the root that is in the lower draws back up to the tree. And every morning the dew that falls forth from the tree is new life. And it is adjudicated at the well where the gods sit at their doom seats in heaven. So that's one of the big reasons why we emphasized our clear and definitive differences towards cosmological views like other groups like the Narayana Society. And we view that the idea that you would take this cosmological view and move all of the roots into the underworld and completely destroy the cyclical nature of that symbology is, I don't know if it's, sometimes I think it's kind of asinine, but other times I think it's just a blatant disrespect towards kind of the mysteries that are revealed for us to understand better things. I've heard all kinds of theories. Oh yeah, Snorri was a Christian, so the three roots are the tree is on its side because he wanted the faith of Asatru to be destroyed. I've heard some crazy stuff, but no, the idea is really, really simple, that the strata of the tree, its roots, descends from those who are living amongst it in cosmic order, the gods and the Nornir, and all that flows into it creates time, creates fate, and ultimately the newborn of our children, whether they are, parts of or the souls of our ancestors drawn up in the tree, and either as these dew, the dew drops, the gods make them Disir, make them Alvar, or let them proceed through to join and give boon to their bloodlines. It's all happens right there at that convergence point. And if you suddenly make all the roots of Yggdrasil at the bottom, one, it greatly loses the purpose of what the place beneath, that place far away, what its mythological purpose is. But it also kind of, again, ruins the ultimate cyclical nature of it all. And it's all just simply because, I don't know, like the axis mundi needs to be maintained. But if we look, like I was speaking with the tripartites, it's the same with the mountain or heavenly mountains, or the tree. All of the centering of the world and the universe is different in every Aryan branch. But again, we're not saying in literalism that's what they are. It's just that the Nordic and Germanic view of the center of the heavenly realm is a tree. Some would say a mountain. And those connection points between them are varied as well. We have the Erminsul, and we have that understanding of the heavens being foisted and placed upon the joist that keeps heaven and the earth separate. And others would say, oh no, it's the mountain, or it's well, generally it's usually just a mountain or a tree. Anyways, so life that comes from Yggdrasil, that flows forward and drops into the well of Erd and manifests in our time and in our reality comes from the tree. And the tree is so vital to the movement of soul power of humanity, and with good reason. And the gods are utilizing this as they refine us, as they make us better. So here he says, yes, that when women are pregnant, they seek the benefit of the tree, because the tree is what bears forth life for the folk as they go forward. And Svipdag says, and also bear in mind too, this is, again, he's seeing the cascadingness of the tree even in Jotunheim, and in Alvismal it's the same. Yggdrasil is mentioned. It is seen. It is understood. It's not simply something far away in heaven, but is also kind of, again, overlapping over all things, and its roots reach everywhere. And Svipdag says in 23, now answer me, Fjölsvin, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. What cock is he on the highest bough that glitters all with gold? So now we're getting into some lore. And most people would know the lore that this cock that crows is Gullinkambi, which means golden comb, like for a rooster. And it's mentioned that Gullinkambi crows out when Yggdrasil shudders, and when Loki is freed from his fetters, he goes, and first thing he pulls to his might and his army are the cursed dead, the ones that do not cross over the bridge, the ones who are on the shores of Nastrand, and they're no longer human. They're Vargar. They're consuming each other, and they're just mindless, beasts of torment and turmoil. And then he rides upwards and into the land of the Jotnar, and that's where he amasses with them all of their armies. And that's when the cock crows and wakes up the Einherjar. And we know of the names of Gullinkambi and of the crow in Jotunheim that also crows, but there is no name for the one in Helgarth. But this is really interesting about that, the transference as this either there's a couple things. The poet was kind of placing the crows in each level for a purpose in mythos, but did not know the name, or that this is the name, but it's based on where it is, where it's transferred. So he says, on the highest bough of the heavenly tree, what is the one that glitters with gold? And he says it's Vidofnir, the tree serpent or the tree snake is his name, and he shines like lightning on Mimamed's limbs. And great is the trouble with which he grieves both Surt and Sinmora, or Sinmaru is how it's pronounced. Couple of things about that. So in the translations, it says Surtur Sinmaru. And most people translate that to be Surt and Sinmora, thus aligning to the idea that Sinmora is perhaps the wife of Surt. But it is, again, worth noting that that's not mentioned in the Old Norse, but could possibly be an add-on to Surtur's name. Or, take it even further, and I hate to play this kind of, but that Surtur is black, and that Sinmora is the correct name. But later on, we see that that's probably not the case. It is most likely Surtur. Because now there's even harder things that Svipdag has to do in order to get into the house. He's already mentioned the wing joints of the bird, and that bird isn't just any bird. It's the rooster that crows in heaven, and just so far unattainable. And then it gets even worse. So, and he says also, this is the other thing, is that the crow is kind of like a rooster does, is harrying Surtur and Sinmora, or possibly just Surtur Sinmorur. What that truly means too is, again, the presence of time. When we think about in mythos sense, the rooster, the cock that crows, is a level of time. So the desire for Surtur to burn things down is being staved off by the presence of time, that all things have to play out as they must. So that's why he says, great is the trouble with which he grieves both Surt and Sinmora, because they cannot rush the timetable they wish, or he cannot. And Svipdag speaks. He says, now answer me, Fjolsvid, the question I ask, for now the truth I would know. What weapon can send Vid Ofnir to seek the house of hell below? What will kill the great, rooster that crows, the warden of Ragnarok? And in this usage, it's very similar to how we say, like, go to hell or send them to hell. Yes, that is the road of death, and hell was synonymous not only with the Austvanir that has kind of slowly been brought into the structure of the gods, but also the place, and also the very act of death. So how can I send this bird to hell? And he says, the only way you're going to do that, Fjolfith speaks, and he says, Levatine is there, that lopped with runes once made by the doors of death, and in Leigjarn's chest by Sinmor lies it, and 9 locks fasten it firm. So it's just getting worse and worse. You need to feed them the wing joints of the chicken, but then you find out the chicken's the chicken of heaven, and then you got to kill it with a sword, and that sword is locked away. It's got an awesome name for a sword. It's the wand of wounding, that runes are spoken by Lopt, which is Loki. And again, this is another emphasis. I think you find people who try to shove everything into Lord Odin, like when it comes to Heimdall. And how can Heimdall teach humanity? It's got to be Lord Odin. That there's something wrong. It's misconnected. It's not right. And so then they say, oh, well, Heimdall's really just Lord Odin. And that's wrong and impious. But here is another perfect example. Loki knows the runes. So there was a transference of this knowledge in the heavenly realms. And here he, places runes into this great, great sword. In his chest, in another kenning for Loki, but some have suggested that Sinmora might also be Sigyn, and that there's this convergence between Surtur and Loki, and Sinmora and Sigyn. I don't particularly know, because even I'm suggesting that Sinmaru might actually be another Haiti or name for Surtur himself, and so that the sword lies within his own chest. This also may denote some story that we don't know, in which the sword, that is, a lot of folks think that the sword is the holy Frey's sword, and it may not be the case. We don't quite know, but we do know now that, that with Surtur, and when he has this sword, there may have been more of like a buildup to it being prepared to help defeat the gods in the end. Svipdag speaks. Now answer me, Fjolsvid. Answer I ask, for the truth would I know. May a man come thence who thither goes and tries the sword to take? And Fjolsvid speaks. So you can see here, it's like, what can I do to feed the dogs? Oh, you're going to have to kill the rooster that wakes the Einherjar up. And what can I kill the rooster with? Oh, you're going to have to get the sword that's, got runes by Loki and is held by Surtur. And it's like, it just gets worse and worse and worse for Svipdag. And then he says, well, is there any way that, anyone could take it? And he says, Fjolsvid in 28, thence may he come to thither goes and tries the sword to take, if with him he carries what few can win, to give to the goddess of gold. And this really kind of circles back around. Some people think that this is a reference to Sinmara, the wife of, but again, I'm even questioning that. But that this is that you must give the holy Freya over in order to gain the sword. And this is a consistent part of a lot of our stories, is that the goddess of gold is consistently held up for ransom. So it leads him full back circle, and it kind of closes the argument that what can I do if I have to do this and I have to do this? But he presses on. He doesn't let it dishearten him. And he says in 29, well, now answer me this, Fjolsvid, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. What treasure is there that men may take to rejoice the giantess pale? And so here, that's interesting. Actually, you know what? That could lend very much so to Sinmara being the giantess. Because he's saying, what treasures can I give that would leave her with happiness, and she would relinquish the sword of Surtur? It's just very interesting the way the Old Norse is written. It doesn't denote that they are two separate people, Surtur and Sinmara. Fjolsvid says, the sickle bright in thy wallet bear. So this is a kenning for a feather. Take a feather from the rooster and place it within, your money pouch. Mid Thofnir's feathers found, to Sinmara give it, and then shall she grant that the weapon by thee be won. So this long kind of shoots and ladders situation. And Svipdag speaks in 31. Now answer me, Fjolsvid, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. What call they the hall encompassed here with flickering magic flames? So he also draws out this conversation to ultimately go right back to the start, which is, what is the name of the hall? And he says in 32, Lear it is called, and long it shall on the tip of a spear point tremble. Of the noble house mankind has heard, but more has it never known. And I think this one really is interesting with, again, that crossover. Is this mortal realm? Is this Jotunheim? Is Svipdag in the mortal realm? Or is this, again, alluding to perhaps historical halls during the migration period, or a historical hall? We don't quite know. And in 33, Svipdag says, now answer me, Fjolsvid, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. What one of the gods has made so great the hall I behold within? And he says, Uni and Iri, Bari and Yari, Var and Veidrasil, Dori and Ori, Delling, and there was Loki, the fear of the folk. So really at this point, other than Dellinger, and I would actually argue that the reason why Dellinger was involved is because this hall is situated right upon the barrier between Jotunheim and the middle world, and Dellinger is the presider over that hall. But ultimately, it leads to the fact of who truly built it is Loki and most likely the dwarves. So he doesn't say the gods other than Dellinger. But again, the dwarves have worked their way up, and Loki was there, and they formulate the house, and it resides right on the threshold between Midgardr and Jotunheim, and that threshold is Dellinger's Hall. Whether or not he was truly a part of it is a different story. But nonetheless, Fjolsvid is speaking kind of with a chiding tongue, because the names that he says are not gods. They're not Ausir. They're Dvergar. They're Svartalfar. They're dark dwarves and Loki. So then he says in 35, Svipdag speaks and says, now answer me, Fjolsvid, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. What call they the mountain on which the maid is lying so lovely to see? And Fjolsvid speaks, he says, it is Lifjabjerg, is it? And long shall it be, a joy to the sick and to the sore, for well shall grow each woman who climbs it, through though sick full long she has lain. So this again is another allegoric sense, like when they mentioned the hall and that the menfolk know it. And now there is a healing mountain that that the humans know of, that women can climb it. And this may be references to physical mountains that our ancestors, long before the Nordic period, are kind of still surviving in the stories, but they're no longer, it's no longer known. But the healing mountain is where she resides, the life mountain. And Svipdag says, now answer me, Fjolsvid, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. What maidens are they that at Menglod's knees are sitting so gladly together? So what handmaidens does she have? And these are not, again, the wife of Surtur is not mentioned in anywhere else, and the maidens of Freya, even though Menglod is kind of presented as not, its deep correlation is clearly there, but perhaps the writers weren't even really thinking of them being as the same. But they are mentioned as having these handmaidens, and it's the same way that we see the mentioning of Holy Frigga with her handmaidens, Holy Freya with, in this story particularly, the holy handmaidens. We see with Ayer and Raun, the 9 daughters, and we see with Njordr, his 9 daughters. And again, these are points of establishment of authority, a point of establishment of divinity. It's a continuous thing. If they have these, they are of high renown. So Lady Frigga has her, handmaidens that are the Austfinir, or are the Ausenir, and now this is the speaking of Menglod's ladies in waiting. So we have he names them Hlif, which is help, and Hlifþrasa, which is the desire to help. Þjóðvara call they the third. Bjart og blíð, and frið, and eir, and our boða. So this is an interesting one too, because again, we see these, obviously the Ausenjur air is kind of mentioned here. But then to our boða is very close to like angerboða. Remember though, AUR means to shape like in clay, or to have like building hands or building pieces. So this, means the one that's bid to create. And of course, most people might hear like friv, and all of that. But Air is the only one that really sticks out to me. But yes, blithe, peaceful, kindly, the one that desire to be kind or to be helpful, are all of their names. And Svipdag then speaks and says, well, now answer me, Fjölsvið, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. Aid bring they to all who offerings give, if I need be found thereof. So I think ultimately what this is an overarching symbolic story stating about the transcendence of a believer to being ascended or being connected to specifically one of the gods, the Ausenjur or Aus, whichever. It is, again, this kind of great attainment over all of these huge obstacles. Fjölsvið says in 40, soon aid they all who offerings give on the holy altars high, and if danger they see for the sons of men, then each from ill do they guard. So much like with Otar and his blessing of the Horg, here that Fjölsvið is saying that if you place upon the altar to Menglod, to Freya, and the handmaidens then enact upon the will of their god to give and to safekeep you. This is exactly the same with the maidens of Fensalar and Frigga. So again, yes, adorning the offerings upon the altars wins us boon through the intermediaries of the gods.
Before we get moving further, as you may notice, the more we go through the lore, linguistics matter to really, to fully appreciate the lore. The names of all of the characters, especially, I argue that the names of the greater known Aesir and Ausenjur are really important, but especially all these extra names that you get of the different characters are extremely meaningful. The more you familiarize yourself with the linguistics, the better you can digest kind of the depths of the meaning and a little bit of the beauty of the picture that's being painted for you. I say that to say this: find people at Pimsleur. We are much like Gorilla Snot or other products I plug on this program. I am not receiving a fee for advertising their product, but I tell you guys about stuff that's cool. I have tried really, really hard a bunch of different times to learn Icelandic. I mean, I've tried probably 5 or 6 times over the last 23, 24 years, and it never works out, and I never feel like I'm making progress. Pimsleur is the first thing that I've tried to where, I mean, within the first 3 lessons, I felt like I was getting something. You know, I felt excited that, wow, I understand something. I'm still working on it. I'm not a fluent Icelandic speaker, nor an Old Norse speaker. But by working through the Old Norse vocabulary and working through Pimsleur's Icelandic, I'm on lesson 12 right now. I'm so I feel like a kid. I'm excited. I'm learning something new. And then when I go back and I read these, especially the bits of our lore, like on the Bellows site that we're looking at, or the site where we get our Bellows translation, reading on the side, I'm like, aha, I know what that word means. I know what that little bit of vocabulary is. Knowing those things and having those touchstones is much more helpful than you may think it might be. And I say that as somebody who's been Asatru and full throttle Asatru involved with this for 24 years. It helps. It helps a lot, and it really opens up a lot of the depth and a lot of the depths and the depth and the beauty of the primary text in a way that you don't quite get if you don't have that. So I think it's really exciting. I'm throwing the plug out there. It's not super expensive. It's cool if you are interested. Pimsleur is awesome, and I'm really excited so far. And I just figured I'd throw it out there. Anybody who seeks to get a deeper understanding of this, and you can see it with Witan Svan when he brings up different points of vocabulary and etymology on these things, it really does add to the understanding of the stories. It unlocks a whole different layer of it that you don't really get, and you can't process if you don't have the fundamental vocabulary. So every bit you learn on that helps. And I've been kind of talking to you guys as we've been doing this. So I just wanted to really plug that because it's been really cool. And Svan, I sent you that password thing over on the side, so you got it. That's something that we are working on internally, is beefing up our linguistics on that. And it's just something I wanted to share with the audience because I'm really getting a lot of benefit out of it. And I think that those of you that don't already have that would get that benefit as well. So I should bring this up before we do it because I know we got like 10 stanzas left. But a question came up, and because I opened the door of linguistics, I do think it has become relevant. Heathen Man asks, hey, Svan, did you ever look up that Elfdalian dialect that survives still in Sweden, that is said to be very close to Old Norse and still use runic script into near modern times? And I remember way back when he first brought this to your attention. Did you ever take a look at that? You're on the spot.
Yeah, no, I don't think I did. I'm
Heathen Man, he has forgotten your question.
No, and I
think discarded your question.
No, I didn't spur
to the realm
question.
of irrelevancy.
And I wonder if it was because something I was searching that didn't equate. I wanted to see. Yeah,
I tell you this. I will remind Svan continuously until he digs into it, because I think it's kind of interesting and I'm curious where it takes him. So we will remember and see if he can do some digging for you before next episode.
Okay, so wait, Alvdalen is the Dale of the Elves. But yeah, it was a tiny province. But as far as like the language goes, and maybe I don't know if I was spelling it wrong. Maybe that was the reason why I couldn't find it. But I have it right here, and I'll be able to kind of like look this up. But yeah, these folks in Sweden, and its classification of it as it's kind of a combination of Nordic and Eastern Germanic, which is really interesting to me.
Svan will take a linguistic journey into the Valley of the Elves, and he will return with elven wisdom for us on our next.
Yes, I will be Alfred. I will be counseled by the elves.
Oh, see, this is what you folks would understand if you took the linguistics.
Just bring back some lembas bread.
Yeah, I will be Alvreður. I'll be counseled by them.
No, but really and truly, I'll remind him on that, because it's a cool thing, and I have also not looked at it, so we'll try to do that.
Yeah, and I have it. I have the page locked in now.
Okay, so Foster Kennel, I will get to you here in just a second, but we got 10 more stanzas we're going to hit, and then I promise I will get to your question. Go ahead. Svan.
Yeah, and just to bear in mind this whole kind of circular point of the rooster that must be slain with the sword that has runes carved in it by Loki and is given to Surtur and his wife, and that the only way to kind of release the sword is to woo her over. And again, is this the same sword of Lord Frey, or is Lord Frey's sword a supplement for this sword? It's all really super, I don't know, like it's like really not common lore knowledge in this poem. I mean, hell, I was even thrown up with the whole mentioning of Surtur's wife, just because I had always taken that as just an addition title, and just totally threw me off. So I'm learning stuff too as we go. This is amazing. So in 41, Svipdag says, "Now answer me, Fjolsvid, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. Lives there the man who in Mengloth's arms so fair may seek to sleep?" And Fjolsvid says, "No man there is who is in Mengloth's arms so fair may seek to sleep, save Svipdag alone. For the sun-bright maid is destined his bride to be." And at this point, it's like, wait a minute, what did you say? Because the whole time, Svipdag has been under the Haiti wind cold, Vindkalder. And he's like, in 43, he's like, "Well, fling open the gates, make the gateway wide. Here mayest thou, Svipdag, see it is me. Hence get thee to find, if gladness soon Mengloth to me will give." And Fjolsvid speaks and says, "Hearken, Mengloth, a man is come. Go thou to the guest to see, the hounds are fawning, the house bursts open. Svipdag, methinks, is here, or is there." Mengloth speaks, "On the gallows high shall hungry ravens soon thine eyes pluck out, if thou liest in saying that here at last the hero is come to my hall." So, one, I think that's an awesome verse in and of itself. But the whole point is, at this point, no, I'm not Vindkalder. I'm actually Svipdag. And if I am fated to be and you are to move out of the way, then all of the crazy things that you have just said don't apply because I am the one fated. And then Mengloth, in fitting fashion that is often accompanied with the Holy Freya, she is, plays out a dreadful threat that, your eyes will be plucked out on a gallows if you're lying and you're telling me that this man is Svipdag. So that, I guess, is more directed towards Fjölsvinnsmál. Mengloth speaks in 46. Whence comest thou hither? How camest thou here? What name do thy kinsmen call thee? Thy race and thy name, as a sign must I know, that thy bride I am destined to be. And he says, Svipdag am I, and Solbjart's son. Thence came I by the wind-cold ways. With the words of earth shall no man war, though unearned her gifts be given. So here, he states that he is the son of Sunbright, Bjart or Bert in Old English, and of course Sol is son. So he is the Sunbright's son. And I've often wondered too if that again is another delignation towards Dellinger, the shining one. But he comes by the cold ways. He's traveled on the north and desolate, and has been blessed by the fates that, if anyone comes towards him in war, as stated, it's not fated. He will always kind of preside over and win. And Mengloth says in 48, well, welcome thou art, for long have I waited. The welcoming kiss shalt thou win. For two who love is long for meeting, the greatest gladness of all. Long have I sat on Livaberg, here awaiting thee day by day, and now I have what I ever hoped. For here thou art come to my hall. Alike we yearned, I longed for thee, and thou for my love hast longed. But now henceforth together we know our lives to end we shall live. So our lives to the end we shall live. So again, this part is really the audience, the folks here, the warriors that are listening to this poem. That, the Svipdag is fated to be with her, and he attains the love. But again, from in a higher spiritual sense, that yes, this is most likely Svipdag ascending to the Holy Freya. And I've always kind of taken it that Svipdag ascends, that there is perhaps the story of the capture of Freya and living in Jotunheim. Svipdag releases her. She goes and finds his lineage as Ottar, and then takes him above as Other, and then he leaves or disappears as the kind of track of the story. But
all right. Well, I think in relatively short amount of time, we have been able to cover both of these. In 1 week from today, we begin the epic journey that is the saga of Egil Skallagrimsson. And that's exciting. It's going to be a lot. Be looking to cover 20 plus chapters per week, but we're going to do it. We're going to make it happen.
Put it like this. The PDF I have is 195 pages. So that's about 50 pages of 8.5 by 11 per night.
Svan's going to rip through it, and it's going to be fantastic. We're going to spend a substantial portion of December with you going through it. It's really cool. Those of you who have read it know that it's awesome and are excited about it. If you have not read it, you are in for a treat because it is a thrilling read. And one of the things that was really profound to me, it's cool. It's about a person who lived and existed. It's really easy to write fiction about someone who's a product of your imagination. You can put them in whatever circumstances you want. Reading about a person who lived and existed and their life be that full of adventure is really something special. So to the last question we have from Foster Kennel, you need to have an interview with Jason Cohn and our white well-being community, which is international and fighting against anti-whiteism and the attack on Western kind. Blessings. So 3 years ago, I actually was on the No White Guilt broadcast with Jason. And that was a cool experience. We're familiar with him. As a matter of fact, he is the one who found us our lender for Njordshof. And Njordshof is the Hof that we're currently paying off. It's our most recent Hof. And through the connections that Jason provided us with, that's how we got that set up. So that's been very advantageous. You know, we're very aware of the No White Guilt movement and appreciate the work that y'all are doing to advocate for our folk. I think that's always welcome. Svan, thank you so much for reading and taking us through the lore as you always do.
I learn stuff too every time we do it. This is
it's been so of the things we're thankful for. I am thankful for the opportunity to go back through these pieces of our lore with you. It's really important that we all go through our lore, but it's important that we do it at different seasons in our lives. And when you do it with different people, you pick up on things differently than you do when you're just by yourself. You get to hear their reactions through the lens that they bring to the table. And it really adds a lot of depth. So I'd encourage everybody to do that. Thank you guys for being with us. I'd like to, as a final kind of note this evening, I am thankful for the fans of Victory Never Sleeps. I'm thankful for our amazing guests that we have on the program. As always, I am beyond thankful for the blessings of the ICEER in my life, in the Asatru Folk Assembly, and bringing us all together for these evenings that we share. And I would encourage everybody tomorrow to feast, enjoy time with your family and your friends, and really take the day to appreciate all of the blessings in your life and to be thankful. And I mean that on a couple levels. I would encourage everyone to give prayer and thanksgiving to our holy ICEER that have done so much to bless us, starting from our very existence and carrying us through our lives. Do that, if nothing else. But also, on top of that, let the people in your life who have blessed you and given you gifts know that you appreciate it. Spend tomorrow, if you're able, and I don't care where you live in the world. I know it's an American secular holiday, but it's a really nice opportunity to take stock of the things that you're appreciative for and to take a moment to recognize that, to say thanks to those who you can thank. And what's more on top of that, tell the people that exist in the world today in Midgard, give them a call or a text and tell them thank you. And to those that have passed beyond the veil, take a moment at your altar, thank them as well. Really, and I'm saying this as much to you guys as I am to myself, spend tomorrow being thankful for all of your blessings, because all of us are far more blessed than often we realize. So with a heart full of appreciation for my blessings, thank you guys for spending the evening with us. Thank you, Svan, for joining us once again and for being one of my very best friends. I love you. I appreciate you. And until next time, be thankful, bone up on your 900s Norwegian, Icelandic, and English history, and get ready for an exciting ride. Till then, hail the Aesir, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and remember, victory never sleeps.
Good night, everyone.